Hey guys, tonight we step gently into a world of quiet devotion, scratchy habits, and candlelit hallways. Because nothing says relaxation quite like medieval religious austerity, am I right? Picture yourself now, standing barefoot in a courtyard paved with cold stones. Dawn is about to break, and the sky is that delicate shade between gray and violet that would probably make an excellent paint color, something like penitent plum, perhaps. But before you start thinking you might enjoy this, let me remind you, this is a medieval convent, so honestly, you probably won't survive this, at least not without losing a few toes to frostbite first. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always curious about which parts of the world are falling asleep to my voice. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the bells ring, you feel a shiver travel down your spine. Not the thrilling kind, mind you, just the regular, uncomfortable type. You glance upward and see the bell tower standing solemn and gray, towering over the courtyard, stark against the sky like a grumpy stone giant who woke up too early. The frost covers everything, making the stones beneath your feet slick and sparkling with tiny crystals that glitter under the lanterns. Beautiful, yes, but mostly freezing and slippery. Welcome to Penance, medieval style. You adjust your posture, pulling your thin woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders, wondering vaguely why medieval monastic architects never thought of insulation or central heating. Then you remind yourself that warmth and comfort are probably considered sins here, or at least distractions from the path of righteousness. And speaking of righteousness, here comes Sister Agnes, shuffling slowly across the courtyard toward you, her wooden sandals clacking softly against the icy stones. Her face is calm, her eyes gentle, and her expression holds all the warmth of someone who just spent the last 2 hours kneeling on cold marble while praying for your soul. Agnes gestures silently toward the chapel door, which means it's time for the morning procession. You nod respectfully, silence is mandatory after all, and fall into step behind her, your breath rising in small clouds as you trudge along. The procession moves with an excruciatingly deliberate pace, because medieval nuns never hurry, not even when their feet are about to turn into blocks of ice. Each step seems calculated to make you more aware of your own body, the biting cold of the stone beneath your bare feet, the scratchiness of your wool habit against your skin, the weight of your sleeplessness pressing down on your eyelids. Inside the chapel, the air is only marginally warmer, but at least there's no wind, and the candles provide some illusion of heat. The walls, thick with centuries of whispered prayers, rise high above you into dim shadows, and the faint scent of beeswax candles and old stone fills your nostrils. It's surprisingly soothing, like visiting your grandmother's attic, assuming your grandmother lived in a chilly medieval monastery, which seems unlikely, but let's go with it. You find your place in the choir stall, a wooden bench polished smooth by countless nuns before you. The seat is hard, the backrest is non-existent, and your bones begin to complain almost immediately. But complaints are sinful too, probably, so you keep them to yourself. As you settle in, the soft rustling of fabric and creaking of wooden benches punctuate the silence. You glance to your right and notice Sister Margaret already deep in prayer, or perhaps asleep. It's hard to tell with nuns sometimes. Her head is bowed, and her breathing is suspiciously slow and even. But hey, who could blame her? These dawn prayers are tough, especially without coffee or even medieval chamomile tea. The abbess rises from her seat at the front, signaling the start of the prayers. Her voice, calm and resonant, begins the chant, an ancient melody as ancient as the stones themselves. The Latin words roll off her tongue effortlessly, weaving through the air in elegant, incomprehensible loops. You follow along quietly, mumbling sounds that approximate the actual text. Honestly, your Latin pronunciation is questionable at best, but nobody seems to notice or care. After all, The medieval church valued participation over comprehension, probably because fewer questions meant less trouble for everyone involved. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns truly understood the Latin they recited daily. Some say they were fluent, well-educated, and intellectually engaged. Others suspect they merely memorized sounds, repeating them dutifully without grasping much meaning. Either way, as you chant softly in the dimness of the chapel, you realize it doesn't really matter. The rhythm is soothing enough, the words comforting in their obscurity, wrapping around you like a warm, albeit scratchy, spiritual blanket. The prayers continue, your mind drifting slightly as your body grows accustomed to the chill. You begin to notice small details, the patterns carved into the woodwork of the stalls, the tiny imperfections in the chapel's stone floor, the way the candle flames flicker and dance with every passing breath. It's oddly mesmerizing, like watching a slow, religious screensaver designed specifically for medieval nuns. Eventually, the chant comes to a gentle close, the abbess signaling the end of morning prayers with a graceful nod. You rise slowly, stiffly, your joints protesting every movement. As you file quietly back out into the courtyard, the sky is beginning to brighten, delicate shades of lavender and rose signaling the arrival of morning. But don't get too excited. Your day of penance and chores is just beginning, and breakfast is still hours away. Spoiler alert, it probably involves turnips. You pause briefly by the chapel door, inhaling deeply, savoring the crispness of dawn air. Your breath forms tiny clouds once again, reminding you that, despite everything, you're still alive. Cold, sleepy, and mildly uncomfortable, but alive nonetheless. Sister Agnes, noticing your hesitation, offers you a kind smile before shuffling onward, her wooden sandals resuming their rhythmic clacking across the stones. Following her back across the frost-covered courtyard, you realize there's something strangely reassuring about this routine. The predictable discomfort, the quiet discipline, the shared sense of purpose. It's not exciting, certainly not luxurious, but it is somehow comforting in its absolute monotony. And perhaps that's the secret of medieval monastic life, finding serenity in boredom, contentment in discomfort, and a strange kind of peace in cold toes and scratchy habits. As you cross back toward the dormitory, the bells begin ringing again, this time signaling the hour. They echo softly against the walls, their sound fading gently into the silence of morning. You wonder briefly who decided bell ringing needed to be done at such ungodly hours, but then again, ungodly hours are kind of the whole point of being godly, aren't they? Finally, you step through the dormitory door, its heavy wood creaking slightly as it closes behind you. Inside, the air is marginally warmer, though still chilly enough to make you appreciate even a thin woolen blanket. You climb back into bed, just for a moment, you promise yourself, and close your eyes, allowing your mind to drift gently along with the echoes of the morning bells. Your penance is off to a suitably uncomfortable start, but beneath the scratchiness and cold, you can't help but sense the quiet beginnings of something deeper, something serene, something boringly peaceful. The habit itches. You're not even fully dressed yet, and already you feel like you've lost an argument with a particularly aggressive bale of wool. The morning light filters in through the dormitory's narrow, arched windows, less like a warm greeting from the sun and more like a silent reminder that it's time to get moving. You sit on your straw-filled mattress, the wooden bed creaking beneath you, and stare at the bundle of clothing neatly folded on the small bench beside you. Each item looks simple enough, but together they form a cocoon of chastity, discomfort, and, frankly, poor airflow. You start with the shift, a long, off-white linen underdress. It's your only real layer of softness, and even that's being generous. The fabric is coarse, a little stiff from line drying in cold weather, and faintly smells of ashes and old soap. As you slip it over your head, it whispers down your arms with all the grace of sandpaper dipped in vinegar. Still, compared to what comes next, It's practically luxurious. Now, for the wool tunic. It's heavy. Heavier than you remembered. Pulling it on is like donning a damp carpet, and it falls around your body with that same shapeless enthusiasm. The sleeves are wide, hanging past your wrists. You tie them at the elbows with narrow bands so they won't dip into the soup later. The hem brushes your ankles, which is perfect because your shoes are technically optional today. And by optional, of course, we mean absent, because Sister Judith borrowed them yesterday for her turn in the vegetable cellar and hasn't given them back. Your feet go bare. The next piece is your scapular. It's a long rectangular panel of dark fabric that drapes over your shoulders and down the front and back like a holy sandwich board. Supposedly, it symbolizes the yoke of Christ. In practice, it feels more like a personal wool sauna that doesn't allow exits. You adjust the corners until they hang straight, then pin them with an iron brooch that is definitely rusting and definitely pokes you every time you move. And now, your veil. The linen veil is meant to cover your head entirely. First comes the quiff, a tight-fitting cap that squishes your hair flat. Then the wimple wraps around your chin and neck, leaving only your face exposed. You look in the polished metal mirror, blurry and warped, and see a face framed in folds of white, eyes just barely peeking out like a startled turnip wrapped for winter.
Finally, the veil drapes over it all, pinning into place with long, dull pins that always make you nervous. One wrong jab and you're doing penance for bleeding on the linens. You press the fabric down, adjust the folds over your shoulders, and take a deep breath. Fully dressed, fully hidden, fully committed. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns found these garments oppressive or comforting. Some letters suggest a quiet pride in the uniformity, the sense of purpose, of losing one's vanity to join something greater. Others imply frustration, a desire to shed the veil even briefly, to let hair breathe, to remember the feeling of sunlight on skin. But as you stand in your full habit now, you mostly just feel warm, stiflingly warm, the kind of warmth that makes you question your life choices. Still, there's something about the ritual of dressing that anchors you. Every layer a reminder of your vows, obedience, poverty, chastity, and apparently discomfort. You smooth the scapular once more and step softly out into the corridor. Your feet make no sound on the stone floor. That's one benefit of being barefoot, you suppose. Though the chill bites up through your soles like little frozen teeth, you find that your body is slowly adjusting, or giving up. It's hard to tell the difference before breakfast. You pass Sister Beatrix in the hall, nodding and greeting. Her veil is slightly crooked, tilted just enough to suggest she dressed in the dark again, but you say nothing. Correction is not your role today. She's carrying a bundle of laundry and muttering prayers under her breath, her hands red from cold water and lye soap. Her breath curls in the air like incense, and she disappears around the corner like a ghost made of wool. Back in your small cell, you sit for a moment and pick up your girdle cord. It's not for holding anything up. You don't exactly need a belt when your outfit weighs more than a small sheep, but it does symbolize your binding to Christ. You tie it with a simple knot, one loop for each vow, and let the ends dangle. Then, almost as an afterthought, you tuck the tiny wooden cross into your sleeve. You're ready now, more or less. You glance at the sundial through the open window and note the shadows have shifted. Time to begin chores. You check the board posted near the chapel door where assignments are written in neat charcoal strokes. Today, you're on candle detail. Again. You walk, quietly, carefully, to the storeroom near the sacristy. It smells of tallow, smoke, and old beeswax. On the shelves are rows of stumpy candles, all slightly uneven, all made by hand, all gently greasy to the touch. Your job is to trim the wicks, scrape off excess drips, and replace the spent candles in the brass holders around the convent. It's not glamorous work, but it is oddly meditative. Scrape, trim, replace. Scrape, trim, replace. You carry a small tray of fresh candles down the main aisle of the chapel, stopping at each holder. The candles flicker gently,
the flame just high enough to cast wavy shadows across the saints carved into the walls. Some of the saints look serene. Some of them look like they're judging you for that time you accidentally fell asleep during matins, but none of them say a word.
As you work, your fingers grow slick with wax. You smell faintly of burnt honey. You think about the women who came before you, decades, even centuries ago, doing this exact task. How many hands have lit these altars? How many prayers were whispered in these very pews? How many layers of wax have built up on these candlesticks, one drop at a time? You replace the last candle near the choir loft and straighten up slowly, your back cracking like old parchment. You exhale through your nose, quietly triumphant, and return the empty tray to the storeroom. Another task complete. Your habit swishes gently around your ankles as you walk. It makes you feel like a silent boat gliding through stone waters. The layers don't grow lighter, but you stop noticing their weight after a while. They become part of you, like the prayers, the silence, and the endless cycles of bells. Back in your cell, you sit once more and rub your feet gently, trying to coax some warmth back into your toes. You wonder how long it will take before your skin forgets what air feels like. Then you laugh, quietly of course, because that's the kind of thought that earns you 3 extra Hail Marys at evening prayer. You look down at your habit and see that a bit of wax has hardened on your scapular. You pick at it absent-mindedly, then stop. Better to leave it. A little wax is nothing. Tomorrow you'll probably earn some soot or turnip stains, maybe even a splash of ink if you're lucky enough to help with copying psalms. You pull your veil slightly tighter, as if it could block out the cold or the thoughts. The fabric is stiff, the knot at your throat slightly off-center. But still, you are clothed, marked, identified, not as a woman in the world, but as a servant of God, hidden perhaps, but not forgotten. Outside, the bells toll again. Another hour gone, another layer folded into the rhythm of the day. And you, wrapped in wool and purpose, rise to meet it.
The broom is heavier than expected. You grip its wooden handle with half-frozen fingers, the straw bristles worn and uneven at the bottom like the hair of someone who tried to cut it themselves in the dark. You drag it forward across the flagstones of the cloister walk, and each sweep makes a soft, whispering sound, like parchment brushing against parchment, or like the sighs of every nun who's ever had to do this before you. It's quiet work, painfully quiet, which of course is exactly the point. The cloister surrounds a patch of damp grass that passes for a garden in winter. It's boxed in by stone arches on all 4 sides, simple, sturdy, unimpressed by your discomfort. The nuns walk through here to get from dormitory to refectory, from chapel to workroom, from silence to more silence. It's not glamorous, but it's central, which means your task today, sweeping the cloister, is technically vital. At least that's what Sister Benedicta said when she assigned it to you this morning with the smallest hint of a smile. You begin in the northeast corner, pushing dust and fallen leaves gently into a heap. The cold floor seeps through your soles, reminding you for the 20th time that you still haven't gotten your shoes back from Judith. Maybe she needs them more. Maybe she lost them in the turnip pit. Maybe she's wearing both pairs just to feel something. The air smells faintly of ash and damp wool with a whiff of lavender from the bundles hanging near the door to the infirmary. You breathe deeply, enjoying the moment despite your increasingly numb toes. Around you, the convent is awakening fully now. You hear footsteps, soft, measured, doors creaking open and closed, a bucket being set down somewhere with a hollow thunk. All of it forming a kind of sleepy domestic symphony that no one would pay to hear, but that you've come to love anyway. As you sweep, your mind drifts. It always does. You think about the first time you swept this cloister. Your hands were clumsier then, and you used too much pressure, and Sister Agnes scolded you for kicking up dust that made everyone sneeze during Mass. You hadn't known then that sweeping was an art, a deliberate meditative act, Not a war on dirt, but a quiet invitation for it to leave. Historians still argue whether daily chores in convents were a form of true penance or simply the practical result of not having hired help. After all, someone had to cook, clean, mend, and maintain. But whether these tasks were burdens or blessings seems to depend entirely on which nun you ask, and whether she just finished scrubbing the latrines.
You stop for a moment and stretch your back. The morning sun has begun to peek over the walls, casting long blue shadows across the floor. You watch them slowly shift as time trudges onward, one ray at a time. The stones beneath you are carved in places, names maybe, or just marks from centuries of feet passing through. One tile near the corner has a chip that always catches the broom. You've come to anticipate it, even look forward to it. A strange thing, the comfort of knowing where the floor will rebel. Further down the walkway, Sister Helene is quietly watering the potted herbs near the infirmary windows. She nods to you, just barely, and returns to her task. She's the sort who speaks more with her eyebrows than her mouth. You like her. She's very good with salves and very bad at remembering feast days. You finish the northeast quarter and begin working your way along the western wall. The breeze has picked up slightly, making your veil flutter annoyingly against your cheek. You try tucking it tighter into your wimple, but it's no use. It's like trying to fold origami with mittens on. Still, there's something lovely about the repetition of it all. Sweep, step, sweep again. Your muscles begin to find a rhythm, your mind wandering further afield. You remember a story Sister Maria once told about a nun who got so caught up in sweeping that she accidentally brushed her own veil into the hearth fire. She wasn't harmed, just startled, and now the novices joke that she was so holy, even her head wanted to become incense. Sister Maria says it isn't true, of course, but that hasn't stopped anyone from repeating it every winter. Just as you begin to feel proud of your progress, the wind blows your neatly gathered pile of leaves back across the floor. You stare at them for a long moment, witness to your personal futility, and sigh in that quiet, resigned way that only cloistered women and unpaid interns can truly master. You sweep them up again, slower this time, more thoughtfully. Maybe futility is part of the point. You're not sweeping for results. You're sweeping because it's your duty, and because it's humbling, and because nothing says spiritual discipline like repeating the same task until your arms hurt and your sense of purpose begins to resemble a crumpled turnip leaf. As you round the final corner, you pass by the old statue of Saint Gertrude, near the well. She's missing a nose, but no one's had the heart or the budget to replace it. Her stone face is still serene, though, looking forever upward, as if contemplating heaven or just very bored. You nod to her, because it feels polite, and because you've secretly given her the nickname Saint Sniffle. You know it's probably sacrilegious, but you also suspect that if she could hear you, she'd laugh, or at least roll her blank stone eyes. You stop beside the well to rest for a moment, leaning on the broom like a pilgrim with a particularly judgmental staff. The well is covered now. It hasn't been used in years, but you sometimes like to imagine what it would have been like to draw water here in the dark. The rope creaking, the bucket dripping, the cold climbing your arms. Probably miserable, but poetic, which, in a way, describes most of your life here.
You glance back across the cloister and notice that the stones you've just swept are already dotted with fresh crumbs from the sky. Bits of leaves, a feather, even what looks like the remains of a very lost beetle. You smile, or at least shift your face in a way that might become a smile later. There is no such thing as a clean cloister, only a temporarily tidied one. You carry the broom back to the tool room, tapping it gently on the ground to shake loose the clumps of debris stuck in the bristles. Inside, the room is dim, dusty, and smells faintly of garlic and forgotten rope. You place the broom in its designated corner, brush off your hands, and murmur a small prayer. not for yourself, but for the broom. May it find peace until tomorrow's trials. Outside, the bells toll again, long and low. Not for mass, not for prayer, just the passing hour. A reminder that time moves forward whether you're ready or not. You glance at your hands, red, raw at the knuckles, and flex them slowly. The scratches will fade, the routine will not. You begin walking toward the refectory, where someone is already laying out the midday bread and root vegetables. Your stomach growls, which is mildly embarrassing, but also deeply human. You try to quiet it with thoughts of saints and sermons, but it keeps reminding you that holiness is difficult when you're hungry. The floor beneath you, newly swept, crunches faintly underfoot. You pause. A tiny pebble, just one. You bend down, pick it up, and flick it into the garden where it joins the other tiny things that don't quite belong. And then you continue walking.
You knew it would be turnip again. The scent hits you even before you enter the refectory, a warm, earthy aroma mingled with something that smells vaguely like wet burlap. As you pass through the wooden door into the long, low-ceilinged hall, your nose confirms what your heart already suspected. Mashed turnip stew with a garnish of absolutely nothing. Again. You walk slowly toward your assigned bench, the soles of your feet grateful for even the slightest change from the cold stone of the cloister to the splintery wood of the refectory floor. The tables are arranged in long rows, plain planks scarred with years of prayer, elbows, and the occasional overzealous bread knife. Atop each are bowls, some cracked, all slightly different shapes, as though even pottery has moods here. You lower yourself to sit. The bench creaks. Everything creaks here, except the nuns, who move with a hushed, gliding efficiency that gives the unsettling impression they are all slightly levitating. Your bowl is already half full, which is generous for a Thursday. Someone has ladled out your portion of the great grayish mash that passes for the noonday meal, and a sliver of crusty bread leans dramatically against the side as though trying to escape. You pick it up and tear off a corner, chewing slowly, reverently. It tastes like air and work. Silence reigns. That's not poetic exaggeration, it's the rule. You eat in silence unless you are the reader, whose job it is to drone from the Gospels or hagiographies during mealtime, so no one has time to notice the lack of salt. Today's reader is Sister Marguerite, and she has chosen a passage about Saint Hilaria, who once lived 3 years inside a hollow tree as penance. You glance around the table and try to judge, silently, whether your sisters are imagining living in a hollow tree to escape the stew or to deepen their spiritual resolve. Probably both. You chew your turnips with a methodical slowness, letting the warmth spread through your core, even if your tongue feels increasingly betrayed. There's a faint hint of time in today's mix, which might be an accident, or maybe Sister Beatrix finally slipped when measuring the herbs and decided not to tell anyone. A rebel. Historians still argue whether meals in medieval convents were intended as nourishment or as a reminder that earthly pleasures were to be endured, not enjoyed. Some abbesses allowed small luxuries, a bit of honey on feast days, or the occasional preserved plum. Others believe such things led to gluttony, vanity, and the downfall of piety. Either way, no one in your convent has tasted a plum since the last bishop's visit, and that was 5 winters ago. You glance at the reader. Marguerite is still going. St. Hilaria has now relocated from the tree to a cave and is living on dew and raw millet. You bite your bread again, trying to appreciate its structural honesty. It does not pretend to be delicious. It does not try to hide its chewiness. It simply is. Across the table, Sister Honorine sneezes once, silently, and blesses herself. Her bowl is nearly empty, and she dips her last bit of bread into the smear of turnip as though retrieving treasure. Her face, lined and solemn, has not changed expression since you entered the refectory.
Your spoon hits the bottom of the bowl with a muted clink, a final surrender.
Now comes the part where you sit quietly and contemplate your sins, your blessings, or the location of the hidden butter Sister Agnes once smuggled in from her cousin's manor. The bread had flavor that day. People still whisper about it like it was a miracle. You fold your hands on your lap. Your stomach is not full, but it is no longer howling. That is the goal. Not satisfaction, but containment. No one overeats here. No one eats enough to sing about. Just enough to keep sweeping, walking, praying, enduring. Just enough to carry the soul from bell to bell. A gentle chime rings at the far end of the room. One bell, not two. That's the signal for cleanup, not dismissal. You rise with the rest, movements choreographed from muscle memory, and carry your bowl to the wash station. A basin of lukewarm water sits waiting, cloudy from previous rinses. You dip your hands, rinse the bowl, wipe it with a cloth so worn it's more whole than fabric. The bowl goes on the drying shelf. Your hands go back to being cold. You return to your bench and wait for the final dismissal bell. During this pause, you're allowed to pray silently, or reflect, or simply be. You choose to marvel at how one vegetable can become so many shades of gray. A distant thunder. No, not thunder, just Sister Imelda's stomach. It echoes impressively. No one reacts. It would be impolite to acknowledge hunger after being fed, no matter how underwhelming the feeding. You recall your first meal here, years ago. You had stared at the bowl in front of you with a mix of confusion and despair, not just because of the food, but because of what it symbolized. A turning point, a commitment. You weren't just trying out the life anymore. You were part of it. And part of that meant eating food that made you long for fasting days. Today, though, the meal no longer surprises you. In fact, there's comfort in the predictability. You may not enjoy it, but you know what to expect. Life in the convent is like that. Layers of small, consistent discomforts that become, over time, indistinguishable from peace. The bell rings again, a soft, echoing tone that seems to vibrate inside your bones. You rise. As you step out of the refectory, you feel the cold air greet you like an old friend with terrible manners. The contrast is sharp. Warm inside, brittle outside. Your breath clouds in front of you as you head toward your next assignment. Possibly laundry, possibly scriptorium, possibly tending to the bees. You hope it's not the bees. But before any of that, you have a few minutes. You detour into the small chapel adjacent to the dining hall. It's empty, quiet. The sunlight filters through the colored glass in thin, dusty beams. You kneel at the side altar, your knees creaking like the wood beneath you. You fold your hands, close your eyes, and whisper a single word of thanks. Not for the turnips, but for the stillness. You feel your pulse slow. Your hands unclench. The habit shifts slightly against your skin, pressing its familiar woolen weight across your shoulders. You adjust your veil. You breathe in and out. There is work ahead, but for now, there is only breath and quiet and the fading taste of something humble and hot.
The candle sputters, but does not die. It's barely morning, but here you are again, nestled among rows of kneeling figures in the chapel, your breath fogging faintly in the chill air. The stones beneath your knees are unforgiving, deliberately so perhaps. The chapel is dimly lit, the flame light flickering against old plaster walls like faint heartbeats. This is Matins, the pre-dawn office of prayer, and it comes too early even for God. You rub the back of your neck and try not to think about how few hours have passed since you last left this place. Sleep had arrived in short bursts, broken by bells and dreams of missing shoes. Your pillow had felt like a sack of old flour. Now, in the cold silence of the chapel, your eyes are still trying to stay closed, despite the best efforts of obligation and mild guilt. The cantor begins the antiphon, her voice soft but insistent, a thread of sound weaving through the darkness. You join in a half-second late, as always, blending into the chanted Latin. You don't understand every word, but your mouth shapes the syllables from long practice. You pronounce Veni Te like a half-spoken yawn, and Gloria Patri with something approaching enthusiasm, if not comprehension. Historians still argue whether the sisters of these early monasteries truly welcomed the multiple nightly prayer hours or merely endured them with pious sighs. Matins, in particular, was the most disruptive, a rupture of sleep at the coldest, quietest hour. But perhaps that was the point. You're not supposed to be comfortable. You're supposed to be present, even if your body would much rather be under 4 scratchy blankets in the dormitory. You sneak a glance to your left. Sister Clotilde is slumped forward slightly, lips moving in time with the psalms, eyes definitely closed. It's a familiar posture. You've worn it yourself. The gentle sway of her upper body gives the impression of someone who is either deeply holy or halfway to face planting. You nudge your own posture back upright and hope you don't resemble a bobbing goose. The cold has a way of keeping you alert, at least for the first half hour. Your fingertips tingle, your nose prickles, your breath, visible in the candlelight, makes you feel like a tiny dragon singing psalms. The floor creaks as another sister shifts her weight, and for a moment you are aware of every joint in your own body. The cantor turns the page. The rustle echoes loudly in the stillness. You begin another psalm, this one about deliverance from enemies. You wonder idly if enemies, in your case, includes the draft coming from the chapel's broken window. Possibly. Maybe even the root vegetables from lunch. Possibly. Even yourself on your more contrary days. There is a strange beauty to these hours, a solemnity that cannot be found in the daylight bustle of chores and practicalities. Here, in the pre-morning hush, your thoughts are slower, your presence more honest. There's no audience, no distraction, just you and the darkness, and the knowledge that hundreds of nuns before you have knelt on these same stones, muttering the same lines into the same frozen air.
Your stomach grumbles faintly, as if to remind you that the last turnip was not entirely satisfying. You press your hand against it and try to send it comforting thoughts. You're not quite sure what those would be. Perhaps a vision of future plums, or at least bread with butter. It quiets down, unimpressed. Somewhere near the front, Sister Lucinde clears her throat. It's a small, dry sound, but in the acoustics of the chapel, it reverberates like a cannon. No one moves. You are not supposed to notice these things, but of course, you do. You return to chanting. The rhythm is soothing in its predictability. Rise, fall, pause, repeat. The call and response of generations. The words wrap around you like an itchy, familiar blanket, one that doesn't keep you particularly warm, but reminds you that you are not alone. Another candle guttering on the sidewall threatens to snuff out, its wax dripping lazily down a tarnished iron holder. You watch it flicker and catch yourself zoning out again. You blink hard, a little too hard. Now your eyes water. Perfect. Someone shifts again, and you hear a tiny, unmistakable snore. Then silence. Sister Clothilde must have startled herself awake. You risk another glance. Her eyes are open now, wide and innocent, as if she's been alert this whole time. You exchange the smallest of smirks before returning to your psalm. It's a dangerous game, humored during matins, but sometimes it's the only thing keeping you upright. You lose your place momentarily and pick it back up a beat behind the others. No one notices, or they pretend not to. Either way, it's fine. You've learned that there's grace even in the slightly off key. By the time the final psalm draws near, the sky outside has begun to shift. Not light yet, but no longer pitch black. A sort of silvery, not quite color begins to filter through the high windows. Dawn is preparing its entrance, and you are, reluctantly, preparing for the next bell. You close your eyes during the last prayer, not in ecstasy or fatigue, but something in between. You picture the Virgin Mary with her hands folded gently, maybe also trying not to nod off. You suspect she would understand. The final Amen echoes in the small chapel like a sigh. You rise slowly, knees creaking louder than they should,
and follow the other sisters back through the narrow hall. Your feet know the way now, tracing the same route as always. The chapel door opens and cold air rushes in with a vengeance, reminding you that yes, it's still very much winter. Back in the dormitory, you have a short window to return to your bed, a gift of maybe 1 hour before Lauds begins. You shuffle to your cot and climb beneath the covers, grateful for the scratchy weight. The warmth is almost immediate, like your body has been holding onto it in reserve. You lie there, eyes open in the half-light, too awake to sleep, too tired to rise. The ceiling beams are dark against the pale plaster above you. You count them again. There are 8. There have always been 8. But somehow it comforts you to check. A creak on the floorboards tells you someone else is still awake, probably Sister Dorothy. She always writes letters in the margins of her prayer book when no one is looking. You once caught a glimpse, nothing scandalous, just little notes to herself. Remember to thank God for bees, and bread still hard. Pray for patience. You smile at the memory, then yawn, a wide, aching thing that shudders through your whole frame. You curl to one side, tug the blanket higher, and let your eyes close. You won't dream much. Sleep here isn't about dreams. It's about surviving the next bell, the next step, the next psalm. But in this sliver of peace, between matins and the day's demands, you let your body rest, not because the rule allows it, but because your soul needs it. And in the distance, you hear the faint creak of another bed frame, another sigh, another sister doing exactly the same thing. And you drift.
You want to ask for a broom, not because you've developed a sudden passion for sweeping, but because someone spilled dried lentils all over the passage to the courtyard, and you've just stepped on them, barefoot. The sharp little circles jab your toes like disapproving saints, and you wince, inhaling sharply through your teeth. But of course, you say nothing, because you're in silence. Not metaphorical silence, not the polite sort of quiet you keep at funerals or in libraries. This is rule-bound, consecrated, binding silence, the kind that doesn't merely ask you to hold your tongue, but insists you unhook your very thoughts from the idea of speaking. From dawn to dusk, and especially in the communal corridors, the vow of silence is as firm as the convent walls. You press your lips together and hobble toward the storeroom with the grace of a limping cat, your face a frozen mask of holy serenity while your foot throbs and your inner monologue rages. Still, no one around you notices, or at least they pretend not to. That's part of the game. The vow of silence might sound peaceful, even meditative, and it is, until you need something. Then it becomes a puzzle, a pantomime, and occasionally a dark comedy of gestures gone wrong. Take, for example, the day Sister Heloise needed to ask for more thread in the sewing room. She pointed at her robe, mimed a sewing motion, and then made a series of increasingly frantic finger pinches that led 3 different sisters to believe she was either having a fit, requesting a small fish, or volunteering to pluck geese. Eventually, she gave up and quietly unraveled her own hem in protest. Now it's your turn. You enter the storeroom and look around helplessly. You see the broom propped behind a bucket, but it's technically not your turn for chores, and taking it unasked is frowned upon. So you hover. You glance at Sister Blandine, who is inventorying jars of dried beans. You point to the broom, then to the floor. Then you pretend to sweep. She blinks once. Then, without a word, she slides the broom your way like a seasoned mime, and you nod your gratitude, all without a syllable exchanged. Historians still debate whether medieval nuns found true spiritual value in the daily vow of silence, or whether it mostly served to prevent bickering about lentils, chores, and hymn-picking. Some convents allowed exceptions, a designated hour after supper, or written notes passed under strict supervision. Others enforced the silence with such zeal that nuns developed entire repertoires of hand signals, facial tics, and eyebrow choreography.
You, personally, are developing a spectacularly eloquent shrug. Outside, you begin sweeping.
There's a strange satisfaction to the rhythm. Push, gather, flick. Push, gather, flick. The courtyard is waking up slowly, like an old cat stretching in the sun. A few sisters pass by you, nodding in silent greeting. The air smells like morning bread and cold stone. Your bare feet adjust to the sensation of flagstones now cleared of lintels. The pain fades, replaced by that mild, ongoing ache you no longer notice until it's gone. You could probably write a book about the different textures of stone in this place. Chapter 1, The Surprising Cruelty of Hallway Granite. You think, as you sweep, about all the things you would say if you could. You'd tell Sister Rosaline that her new embroidery looks like a miracle of thread, even if the lamb in the nativity scene has 3 ears. You'd ask Sister Alarice what on earth she puts in the laundry water to make the wool smell less like damp sheep. You'd tell the Mother Abbess that sometimes the rule makes you feel like your soul is a stone that's being gently eroded, one silent hour at a time. But instead, you sweep. And in sweeping, you pray. That's what they taught you. Every act, when done with intention, becomes a form of prayer. Washing dishes is a hymn. Scrubbing floors is a psalm. Sweeping lintels, apparently, is spiritual warfare. You pause, lean on the broom, and let your gaze drift upward. The sky is that pale, forgettable shade of gray that never quite turns into weather. The clouds drift like sheep with nowhere to be. There's a pigeon perched on the chapel roof, cooing with an exaggerated sense of purpose. You suspect it's the same one that tried to sneak into the refectory last week. That was the first time you saw Sister Edmonde break her silence. She'd shouted "shoo" with such fervor that the pigeon nearly turned inside out. It had been glorious. A chuckle bubbles up inside you at the memory, but you bite it down before it can escape. Silent laughter is a full-body experience. It leaves you breathless and teary-eyed and more awake than coffee. Eventually, the bell rings, the one that means the hour of chores is done. You return the broom to its hiding place and wipe your hands on the hem of your habit. Not the cleanest method, but also not the worst you've used. You once dried your hands on a passing chicken. It was a long day. On the way back to the cloister, you pass the scriptorium and peer inside. Rows of nuns sit at their desks, copying texts in monastic quiet. You admire them, the patience, the precision, the ink-stained fingertips. One sister, face serene, is squinting at a particularly complicated illuminated capital. You can't tell if it's a lion or a dragon, but either way, its tongue seems far too long.
You reach your dormitory and sit on the edge of your cot. This is your moment of stillness, a breath between tasks. You think again of words, not the written ones, but the ones you carry in your throat. All the things you could say, if allowed. You miss the shape of your own voice. It's like a friend gone on pilgrimage. There are exceptions, of course. Emergencies, confession, singing. Ah, yes, singing. The loophole that saved your sanity. You rise again and drift toward the chapel. Vespers aren't for hours, but the space is never truly closed. You sit in the back pew and hum. Not loudly, not in defiance, but in memory. A single note, rising and falling, barely enough to stir the air. You think of the first time you heard the convent choir sing, long before you took your vows. You had been a visitor then, uncertain and unsure. The voices had filled the space like sunlight, woven through stone and dust and the clatter of unsure faith. You had cried, not from sadness or joy, but from something in between, the feeling of having found a place you didn't know you were looking for. You hum a little louder, just for a moment, then silence again. You return to the cloister walkway, where the afternoon light slants across the arches. The patterns on the floor are always different, like God keeps moving the sun just to keep the stone interesting. You pass Sister Heloise, who gives you a tiny nod and a smile that says, "I understand everything and also nothing." You nod back. It's not about the talking, you remind yourself. It's about the listening. And as your feet return to their slow rhythm along the stones, as the bell tolls faintly in the background and the sky begins its long turn toward dusk, you realize that some of your loudest thoughts have finally fallen asleep. And for once, that silence feels like peace.
You kneel. It's not dramatic, this moment, not some thunderclap of guilt or revelation. Just the ordinary sound of knees against stone, your wool robe tugging at your legs, and the quiet creak of the confessional's wooden partition. You wait. The confessional in this convent isn't ornate. It's a small, dark alcove near the back of the chapel, curtained off with an old linen cloth. The priest is on the other side, maybe Father Hugo, maybe Father Bernard, you never really know. His voice is always kind, slow, a little nasal, but it's not the voice that matters. It's what you're going to say, which today is not much. You search your conscience, flipping through the inner pages of your week like a book you've already read 3 times. Did you sin? Probably, but not in any thrilling, operatic way. You didn't steal bread, you didn't slap anyone, you didn't harbor murderous thoughts, unless you count that one moment when Sister Perpetua accidentally moved your laundry to the damp line, so you dig deeper. "Bless me, Father," you begin softly, "for I have sinned. It has been 6 days since my last confession." There's a pause on the other side. Not judgmental, just the priest making sure he's settled. You continue. "I was distracted during matins. I drifted twice." A pause. "And I coveted Sister Clotilde's embroidery thread. It's the good flax, the kind from Flanders." Another pause. "And I pretended not to hear when Sister Josette asked for help with the water bucket. I was, tying my shoe." You let that last one hang there. It's weak. Everyone knows the shoes here don't have laces. Historians still argue whether confessions in medieval convents were truly about unburdening one's soul or simply reaffirming the structure of communal discipline. Some claim that minor, almost laughable sins became ritualistic, a kind of emotional inventory more than a cry for redemption. You suspect it's both. Confession, for you, has become a quiet performance of humility, a slow, methodical checking of your spiritual shoelaces. The priest clears his throat and offers the usual absolution. He recommends 3 prayers and a moment of reflection in the chapel. Standard fare. You murmur thanks and rise slowly. Your knees are not fans of abrupt movement. You return to the pews, slide into your usual spot, and bow your head. You try to reflect as ordered, but your brain wanders again, because it always does. You wonder what would happen if you confessed something truly outrageous. "I once hid an entire loaf of bread under my bed and ate it with a spoon." Or, "I danced in the laundry room at midnight, wearing only a scapular and my boots." Or, "I faked a vision to get out of latrine duty." Of course, you've done none of these things, but the thought alone makes your lips twitch. You focus on your prayers.
In the stillness, the chapel feels warmer than usual. sun filtering through the high window panes, painting soft gold lines across the dusty floor. Your hands are folded, but your fingers fidget slightly, thumbs tapping a silent rhythm only you can hear. You try to recall the proper psalm, something about mercy, something about grace. The verses tangle in your memory like a drawer full of mismatched socks. You glance around. Sister Alarise is praying with impressive stillness. You envy that. You wonder how she clears her mind so thoroughly. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's just better at looking serene while mentally debating the best way to pickle onions. The curtain rustles behind you. Another sister enters the confessional. The cycle continues. You rise quietly and move toward the vestibule. The sun has shifted again, casting a lattice of light across the corridor. Dust motes float like lazy snowflakes. You walk slower here. Something about confession always makes your limbs a little looser, your thoughts a little fuzzier, like you've exhaled something you didn't know you were holding. You pass the courtyard again and see Sister Blandine talking to the cat. Not talking, technically. She's keeping her vow of silence, but her face is expressive, her hands gesturing wildly as the convent tabby, Sir Pounce, though no one will admit who named him, stares back with the disinterest of royalty. The cat yawns and stretches, tail twitching before curling up against her habit as if declaring victory. You wonder, not for the first time, whether the cat has more freedom in this place than any of you. You smile, then check yourself. You're supposed to be penitent. You return to your cell and kneel once more. This time, not for confession, but for the afternoon prayers. You've built a rhythm into your day now. Kneel, rise, repeat. It's a liturgical dance, minus the music. You try to focus on your breathing, on the faint scent of wax and wool and dried herbs that hangs around the convent like an old memory. You let the quiet wrap around you like a warm shawl. This, they say, is how you become closer to God, through humility, through honesty, through the silent, awkward offering of your flaws, however small or strange. You think of your sins again, the ones you mentioned, the ones you didn't, the ones you might invent just to keep things interesting. You think about how hard it is to measure virtue in a place where everyone is equally tired, equally itchy, and equally devoted. You think of the time Sister Udile confessed to feeling too much joy while eating honey. She had wept afterward, not from guilt, but from relief, as if God had finally acknowledged that even sweetness can be dangerous. You sigh. Then, in a moment of pure mischief, you whisper, just once, just to yourself, jam. It makes no sense. It's not even a sin. But for some reason, the word feels heavy with meaning. A secret known only to you and the cracked stones beneath your knees. You press your fingers to your lips and smile. Not because you're proud.
You startle awake before you even realize you were asleep. Not in bed, of course. You're seated, upright, in the dim corner of the scriptorium, a quill suspended midair and a faint smear of ink drying on the side of your thumb. Your eyes, gritty and overstrained, try to refocus on the letter G you were illuminating. It looks too bold, possibly demonic, definitely not what St. Gregory deserves. You sigh softly, rub your fingers, and dip the quill again. The scriptorium is a place of silence and slowness. The air is dry, the windows narrow, the benches hard enough to discourage daydreams, but apparently not effective enough today. Around you, other sisters bend over their parchments, heads veiled and steady, hands moving with careful purpose. You glance across the long table at Sister Therese, whose fingers are permanently stained dark with ink, like she's been blessed by a particularly artistic crow. She's painting a border of vines that seems to have taken on a life of its own, each leaf curling like it's about to whisper something. You are both impressed and faintly resentful. Your own parchment, by contrast, looks like it's been worked on by a distracted goat. You try to refocus. The letter you're copying is a commentary on the Psalms,
filled with contemplations so dense they make your brain feel like wet wool. The margins are narrow, the script uniform. You've copied the same passage 3 times already because you kept misspelling iniquity. One time, you even added an accidental G, which turned it into a completely new heresy. The rules here are precise. Each quill stroke must be deliberate, each line justified, each initial drawn with humility. A single blot or wobble, and the whole page may be scraped and redone. Sometimes you wonder whether the monks invented this task as punishment. Historians still debate whether female monastic scriptoria operated independently or were trained under male scribes, but the truth likely varied from convent to convent. Some, like yours, were given full creative autonomy, within the strict bounds of ecclesiastical approval, of course. No cheeky illustrations of rabbits stealing loaves allowed. Although, you once caught a glimpse of a margin drawn years ago, hidden in the depths of a psalter, now reserved for high feast days. It showed a rooster in a mitre chasing a very concerned-looking bishop. No one knows who drew it, but everyone suspects Sister Euphemie, who now works in the herb garden and never laughs, which is exactly what someone with a wild sense of humor would do to throw you off the scent. You squint again at your G. Nope, still wrong. You reach for your knife, used not for battle, but for scraping. You gently lift the layer of ink from the parchment, coaxing the calfskin back into compliance. The scrape echoes slightly. It's the only sound in the room apart from soft breathing, the rustle of pages, and the occasional sneeze that no one acknowledges. You rub your temple. Your head feels like a cold bell. Scriptorium work isn't just about copying words. It's about dissolving yourself into the rhythm of ink and thought. You become a conduit, a vessel, a walking, blinking, occasionally hungry transcription machine. But some days you miss the thrill of not knowing what comes next. Here, the next word is always known. It's just a matter of getting it right.
You look out the tiny window. The sun has moved, angling itself across your bench and illuminating the raised texture of the parchment. You can see where the calf's veins once ran. It's humbling in a quiet way. A life turned into a page. Your hands turned into a voice. You try again. The G forms cleanly this time. Round, modest, devout. You resist the urge to draw a crown on top, barely. Across the table, Sister Teresa has finished her vine border and is now filling in a tiny portrait of King David with a harp. He looks smug, probably because his harp has 6 strings and yours snapped 2 last Lent and no one's replaced them since. You flex your fingers, which have gone numb. The ink smells sharp today. Someone overdid the gall in the gallnut mix again. Either that or the bottle is fermenting into wine, a very unpleasant wine. You whisper a prayer to St. Jerome, patron of translators, and hope he's in a merciful mood. The bell rings. It's a soft, melodic chime, meaning it's the end of the session, not a call to arms. You stretch slowly, your spine popping like a dry fire. Several sisters blink and stretch their necks in unison. One yawns so wide you could map her tonsils. You clean your quill, cap your ink, and gently place your unfinished page under a slate to keep it from curling. It's not your best work, but it's honest. You step outside, blinking at the sudden brightness. The cloister is bathed in late afternoon light, and a sparrow hops along the path as though conducting an invisible choir. You follow it, not because you need to, but because for the first time in hours, you can move without thinking of spacing and margins. You sit beneath the old fig tree and let your hands rest in your lap. There's ink on your knuckles and a smudge on your cheek. You look like you've been through a very quiet war. You exhale, and then you smile. Because even though your work is small, even though your G may never grace a bishop's lectern or impress a scholar, you were part of something enduring, a thread in the great tapestry of thought. You helped keep memory alive. Not yours, maybe, but someone's. You pluck a fallen fig from the grass, examine it for worms, then take a cautious bite. It's sweet, shockingly so,
You wonder if anyone else knows the tree is fruiting again. You briefly consider keeping the secret. But no, that's not what saints do. You rise, wipe your fingers on your robe, and begin heading toward the kitchen garden. You'll tell Sister Sabine. She'll know how to harvest the figs before the birds do. And maybe, just maybe, she'll let you help. But not before you sneak one more bite. You hum as you walk, the taste of ink replaced by the taste of sugar and sun. And somewhere in your pocket, you've hidden a tiny corner of parchment from your last mistake where you drew, very faintly, a chicken with a halo. Just for yourself. Just to remember that even the holiest hands sometimes doodle.
You wake before the bell. It's not dramatic. There's no jolt, no sudden gasp. Just a quiet floating upward into awareness, like a leaf drifting to the surface of a pond. Your room, if it can be called that, is bathed in faint bluish light, the kind that arrives just before dawn, when the world is still undecided about whether to wake up or go back to dreaming. You lie still. The stone beneath your straw mattress is unforgiving, but your body has grown used to it, mostly. You've developed the kind of muscle memory that makes it possible to sleep through creaking beams, echoing coughs, and even the occasional mouse scuffle. But not this morning. Something nudges you gently awake from within. You breathe in. The air smells like dust and rosemary. Someone must have swept the corridor yesterday and left a bundle of herbs tucked behind a window. A little gesture, a little grace. You rise. The habit is cold as you slip it over your shoulders. The floor bites at your soles. You step into your shoes, the stiff leather softened by long walks across worn flagstones. Every movement has a pattern now. You don't think, you flow. You move toward the cloister walk. Outside, the sky is still dark, but thinning. Stars fade like breath on glass. The chapel looms ahead, a silhouette in silence. You aren't required to be up this early. No one will take note of your presence or your absence. But something in you needed the quiet. You push open the chapel door and step inside. Candles are already lit, probably Sister Rosaline, who claims she can smell the moment before morning. You wonder what that smells like. Today it's beeswax, damp wood, and the faintest trace of incense still clinging to the walls. You kneel in the second pew, out of habit. Not the front, never the front. Only saints or novices sit there, and you are neither. Your knees find their groove in the cushion, already dented by years of prayers. You close your eyes. This is the hour of none. Or perhaps it's lauds. You're not quite sure anymore. Time in the convent isn't so much a straight line as a loop made of bells. Morning prayers blend into work, which blends into more prayers, which blends into meals that feel more like short breathers between obligations. It's comforting, in a way, like being a pebble rolling in the same river, day after day. Historians still argue whether nuns in the 13th century truly adhered to every canonical hour, especially in smaller convents without sufficient clergy. Some believe the strict adherence to liturgical rhythms was often flexible in practice, shaped more by crops and illness than by clocks. And you believe it. Some days the bell seems to ring suspiciously late, usually after Sister Perpetua's stew. The door creaks behind you. Another sister slips in, then another. The chapel gradually breathes awake, filled by the sound of shuffling feet and the occasional clink of a rosary. You all sit or kneel in near silence, waiting for the first voice to rise. Then it comes. A soft chant, barely more than a whisper, curling upward through the rafters like smoke. You join in without thought, your voice sliding into place like a bead on a string. The Latin is familiar, well-worn, and not entirely understood, but that's never stopped anyone. It's not about comprehension, it's about intention.
You lose yourself in the melody, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it's one of the few moments when your voice belongs to something greater, when your breath is not yours alone. You are not performing, you are participating. You
You remember your first chant, years ago, when your voice cracked and your face burned with shame. Sister Blandine had nudged you afterward and whispered, "The angels didn't mind." You had believed her, mostly. As the chant ends, a hush settles again. You remain still, letting the final note echo in your chest. Then, slowly, the sisters begin to rise and file out, some to the kitchen, some to the gardens, some to their cells to prepare for their duties. You linger, not because you are holy, but because you are not quite ready to re-enter the noise of routine, even if that noise is made mostly of quiet tasks and silent smiles. Eventually, you rise too. In the corridor, the first light of morning has fully arrived. It slides along the floor in long golden bands, catching bits of dust like tiny floating planets. You pause at the window. Outside, the convent garden glows. Rows of greens and herbs catch the dew, sparkling like tiny jewels. You'll be working there later today, assigned to weeding, if the board still says your name. You don't mind. Weeds are predictable. They have no politics. You continue down the hall, passing Sister Agnes, who is already peeling onions by the kitchen. She nods at you. Her eyes are red, not from emotion, just the onions. You nod back, the universal language of early risers with too much to do. Your stomach grumbles, reminding you that prayer does not, unfortunately, replace breakfast. You turn into the refectory. The morning meal is simple. Porridge again. There's always porridge. Sometimes thin, sometimes alarmingly thick, depending on who's stirring. Today it's somewhere in between. You take your bowl, your seat, and your silence. Meals are eaten without conversation. Only the soft scrape of spoons and the occasional unfortunate burp, usually from the youngest novice, breaks the reverence. You eat slowly, mindfully, or at least you try. Your mind drifts. You think of figs again. You think of the parchment in your drawer. You think of Sister Therese's inky vines and wonder how long it would take to learn to draw them yourself. You think about Saint Cecilia, patron of music, who supposedly sang through her martyrdom. You've always wondered whether that's poetic license or poor translation. You finish your porridge, bow your head, rise. Back in the hallway, you breathe in the rhythm of the place. The day is beginning in earnest now. Tasks will follow. Scrubbing, planting, tending, copying, praying, sewing. Each one a note in a long, slow hymn. You catch your reflection in the glass of the old door. Just a flicker. A veil, a face, a pair of eyes still trying to learn the difference between sacrifice and routine. You smile at her. Then you turn and walk back into the day.
You stoop, pull, and toss. The garden has claimed you for the morning. You're assigned the western plot today, mostly carrots, a few limp heads of cabbage, and one extremely judgmental scarecrow. The sun is warm on your back, but not yet punishing. The soil is soft enough to yield without a fight, but still clings to your fingers like it doesn't want to be alone. Your knees sink into the earth as you reach for another weed. Your fingers know which ones to pull without looking. There's something about the way unwanted plants grow, always more confident than the ones you're actually trying to cultivate. The weeds are fast, opportunistic, and beautifully stubborn. Like Sister Perpetua in a theological debate, you smile at the thought. The convent garden isn't just for food, it's a place of reflection, a quiet stage where patience is cultivated alongside root vegetables. Every sister is assigned a rotating patch of land, except for Sister Odile, who's been banished from the beats since the incident. No one will tell you exactly what happened, but the rumors involve a hoe, a snake, and some unfortunate theology. You pause to wipe your brow. Sweat beads at your temples, sliding slowly under your veil.
The breeze is lazy but kind. You hear bees, real ones this time, not the metaphorical kind that buzz in your head during silent prayer. They float from flower to flower in the herb border, oblivious to your effort and devotion. You envy them, just a little. You resume your task. The rhythm of weeding becomes hypnotic. Pull, shake, toss. Pull, shake, toss. The soil sighs with each movement, like it's grateful for the attention. You lose track of time. Your thoughts unravel slowly like a spindle unwinding in reverse. You think of how your hands, now coated in dirt, were once meant for embroidery. Well, they still are, but the transition from needle to root has its own poetry. Both require focus. Both require softness and pressure and balance. Both prick you when you aren't paying attention. Historians still argue whether convent gardening in the medieval era was considered genuine labor or symbolic penance, especially in urban cloisters with limited land. Some scholars believe it functioned as a metaphorical Eden, a return to simplicity. Others argue it was just a practical way to keep the soup pot full and the sisters tired enough to sleep through matins. You suspect it's both, like everything else here. You straighten your back, stretch your arms. The carrot rows look marginally more dignified now, the cabbage still stubbornly drooping like it's been insulted. You squint toward the fig tree. Sister Sabine is already there, plucking ripe ones with the care of a jeweler examining pearls. You make a mental note to wander over later, for spiritual reasons. Possibly. "Good morning," comes a soft voice behind you. You turn to see Sister Jean, arms full of wilted greens and a basket of eggs. Her expression is the same as always, gentle, slightly amused, like she's been listening to a joke the rest of you haven't caught on to yet. "Your carrots look righteous," she adds. You bow your head solemnly. They've converted. She laughs, quiet and full. Then she wanders off toward the kitchen with her harvest, humming something that might be a hymn or might be a tavern tune with new lyrics. With Sister Jean, it's hard to tell. You dust off your hands and rise.
The garden is full now. Sisters moving quietly between rows, carrying tools, sharing water, pulling weeds like penitents, scrubbing their souls. You watch them a moment. The line between holiness and horticulture is not as clear as you once thought. Your own basket, half full of stubborn weeds and slightly triumphant roots, sits at the edge of the plot. You carry it toward the compost pile, where things are returned to the earth in the slow hope that they'll come back kinder. The pile is warm, always surprisingly warm. You dump your contribution and feel oddly satisfied. There's something beautiful in giving your waste to something that knows what to do with it. On the way back, you stop at the herb garden. Sister Angele is tending the thyme like a woman possessed. Her brow is furrowed. Her mouth is moving in silent argument. She's likely debating whether to cut now or wait for the full moon. She claims it changes the flavor. No one has evidence, but no one dares contradict her unless they want to be assigned to leach jar cleaning. You touch the rosemary, just briefly. The scent floods your nose, sharp, green, familiar. It smells like memory, like kitchens and rituals and late-night whispers. You pluck a tiny sprig and tuck it into your sleeve. For later, for nothing in particular. You return your basket to the shed, wash your hands in the stone basin. The water is cold, shocking, grounding. You stare at your reflection in the basin for a moment. Mud-spattered cheeks, tired eyes, a faint smile. Not bad for a morning's work. You dry your hands on your robe and make your way toward the refectory. A slice of bread and cup of thin broth await you. Technically second breakfast, though it's really more of a don't faint before noon snack. You sit alone today, not out of preference, but because the table fills unevenly and you happen to be last. You don't mind. It gives you space to think.
You chew slowly. Across the hall, Sister Clotilde is explaining something to Sister Marguerite using only her eyebrows and a piece of bread. They both look delighted. At the far end, someone knocks over a cup, and a collective gasp of theatrical horror ripples down the benches. You suppress a grin. It's a good day. Not extraordinary, not miraculous, just steady. Which is, in this place, its own kind of blessing. You finish your bread, stand, bow, and slip outside once more. The sun is higher now, the shadows shorter. The bell will ring soon, calling you back to the chapel for midday prayers. You walk slowly, savoring the last few moments of freedom before structure reasserts itself. On your way, you pass the old bench under the ivy arch. You pause, sit, breathe. The ivy rustles in the breeze. Somewhere, a bird sings a note that doesn't quite resolve. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the morning settle in your bones like a gentle, persistent peace.
You stand in line, bowl in hand, listening to the ladle strike the pot like a metronome for humility. The refectory is filled with the rich smell of lentils, or something lentil-adjacent, at least. Sister Perpetua, reigning champion of the kitchen rota this week, has a peculiar relationship with seasoning, sometimes divine, sometimes disastrous. Today smells like somewhere in between, promising, but with a hint of confusion. You inch forward, your feet shuffle against the cool stone floor. The air is thick with steam and soft clatter, bowls, wooden spoons, the muted swish of habits brushing past one another. No one speaks aloud. Instead, the silence is filled with the subtle chorus of discipline. Mouths closed, eyes lowered, prayers whispered inwardly if not with lips. When your turn arrives, you hold out your bowl. The ladle dips, rises, pours. The contents hit the bottom with a sound that can only be described as theological. Not in doctrine, but in the sense that you will need faith to eat it. You nod, step aside, and walk to your seat. The refectory is arranged in long, sturdy rows. You always sit near the window, not for vanity, but because you once sat there by chance and never dared to move. It's an unwritten rule in the convent. Seat loyalty is stronger than any vow. You slide into your usual spot, set down your bowl, and bow your head. A bell rings. The prioress begins grace from her table, her voice clear and even. Everyone joins in, soft voices cascading like a gentle wave. When the prayer concludes, spoons begin to rise. The first bite is fine, warm, grainy, possibly thyme, possibly pencil shavings, definitely filling. You eat slowly. You've learned to treat each bite as a form of meditation. It's not about pleasure, not here. It's about nourishment, simplicity, solidarity. Lentils tie you to the history of every nun before you, and likely everyone to come. Historians still argue whether medieval convent meals were genuinely austere or selectively embellished for feast days. Some manuscripts suggest elaborate cheese platters and spiced wine on high holidays, while others read like famine journals. The truth is, it depended on the wealth of the abbey, the generosity of patrons, and occasionally, the harvest. Your convent falls somewhere in the middle, too humble for feasts, too established for starvation. Meals are predictable, comforting in their repetition, like prayers you no longer question the meaning of.
You think about the garden, about the carrot you pulled that looked like it had 2 legs and was dancing. You'd buried it again, in case it had dreams. You think about Sister Jeanne's secret tune. You think about the parchment in your drawer, the one you saved from the scrap pile where the ink bled into the vellum in a way that looked like wings. Your spoon scrapes the bottom of the bowl. Meal nearly done, you glance across the room. Sister Veronique is chewing with the expression of someone solving a minor theological dilemma. Her spoon pauses between each bite, as if she's mentally consulting a council of saints. Next to her, Sister Avdil sneezes, then immediately bows her head in apology to no one in particular. At the far end, the novice Leonie has managed to spill water across her lap again. She is at this point practically amphibious. No one reacts. She mops it with the hem of her habit, resigned to her role as the daily disturbance. A small smile creeps onto your lips. You return to your meal, finish it, and place your spoon gently beside your bowl. Hands folded, eyes forward, waiting. After a time, the bell rings again. Everyone stands. You carry your bowl back to the kitchen, passing through a doorway that always seems too narrow for the number of elbows involved. The kitchen is warm, loud with clinks and soft voices. Dishes are scrubbed in big stone basins. A stack of bowls teeters dangerously close to metaphor. You rinse your bowl, stack it, dry your hands, and step out into the cloister once more. The light has shifted again. Afternoon now. The sun cuts across the walkway in slanted bands of gold and shadow. You walk slowly, letting the rhythm of your footsteps sync with the pattern of the stone tiles. Each tile is slightly different. Some cracked, some smooth, some worn down in the exact shape of Sister Clotilde's stride. You can almost hear her grumble echoing through the corridors of memory. "These souls are more holy than my prayers," she once said, tapping her sandals against the wall like a prophet with poor posture. You smile. Your next task waits. Sewing in the workroom. You step through the archway and into the long, narrow chamber where baskets of linen line the walls and sunlight filters through small, dusty windows. The air smells of beeswax, cotton, and somehow strawberries. You're not entirely sure why. You settle at your usual spot by the window and pull a half-finished altar cloth from the basket.
It's fine work. Linen so tightly woven it almost sings when the needle passes through. You thread your needle, tug gently, and begin, stitch by stitch. Tiny crosses, neat hymns, the occasional monogram for feast days or visiting clergy. Your hands move with memory more than thought. You've done this so often that the rhythm carries you without effort. You think of saints who sewed, of hands older than yours, weaving beauty into utility. Some say embroidery is a prayer of fingers. You don't know if that's true, but you do know that when your thoughts have jumbled, this helps straighten them out. You glance to your left. Sister Lucinde is bent over a torn hymn, her brow furrowed like the fabric offended her. To your right, Sister Marguerite is doing mending for the kitchen aprons, humming so softly it blends with the ticking of the clock. You keep stitching. Each loop is a breath, each knot a thought anchored. You pause occasionally to flex your fingers. The joints ache more than they used to. You wonder if one day you'll teach someone else how to make these knots, or if your stitches will just quietly join the others, anonymous and essential. Historians still debate whether nuns were permitted decorative flourishes or confined strictly to functional embroidery. Some records suggest elaborate altar cloths with gold thread. Others imply that ornamentation bordered on vanity. Likely the needle slipped both ways, depending on the abbot. You prefer small flourishes, a vine that curls a little longer, a stitch in a different shade, almost invisible unless you knew to look. A secret signature of sorts. Not pride exactly, just presence. The bell rings, distant. You finish your row of stitching, tie the thread, fold the cloth neatly, and place it in the basket. You look out the window. The sky is beginning to soften. Afternoon is leaning toward evening. A few clouds drift like sheep with nowhere particular to be. You envy them, just a little. You rise, brush the threads from your robe, and walk toward the chapel once more, ready for another hour of prayer, another moment of stillness, another breath in the long, quiet life
you've chosen.
You blink slowly in the candlelight, your spine protesting as you kneel once more in the choir stall. The Vespers bell has long stopped echoing, but your knees are still negotiating terms with the wooden bench beneath them. Every surface in this chapel is made of something that disapproves of your joints: stone, wood, or centuries-old discipline. The psalms begin. Soft voices rise like steam from morning porridge, gentle, warm, unwavering. You fall into step. The Latin flows from your mouth without thought, muscle memory carrying you where meaning sometimes cannot. The words are like smooth stones in your mouth. You've chanted these lines so many times they feel as though they were etched into your ribcage at birth. De profundis clamavi ad te, Domine. From the depths, I cry to you, O Lord. You wonder if you're meant to feel something every time, or if the real holiness lies in showing up, night after night, regardless of whether your soul has anything profound to say. The benches creak gently as the sisters shift. No one makes eye contact. This is not a space for faces, only voices. You glance sideways. Sister Isabeau is 2 stalls down, her mouth moving slightly out of sync. She always rushes the end of every verse, like she's late for something deeply important and mildly blasphemous. Next to her, Sister Leonie is mouthing the words without sound, eyes half closed, possibly asleep, or transcending, or both. You envy her either way. The Vespers continue, psalm after psalm washing over you like low tide. You don't even bother to track which one you're on anymore. The cycle is eternal, looping through the liturgical calendar like a carousel that occasionally stops to change candles. Historians still argue whether the nuns truly found meaning in the repetition of canonical hours or simply endured them out of obligation. Some accounts praise the structure as a ladder to heaven. Others describe it as a means of survival, a way to keep one's mind busy enough not to break under the weight of cloistered life. You believe it's both. There are nights when the words feel like wings. There are nights when they feel like stones. Tonight, they feel like warm soup, comforting, repetitive, salty in places. You adjust your weight as the antiphon begins again. The cantor's voice rises like a tired bird, strong, if a bit resigned. It is not performance, it is ritual. The difference is subtle but deeply felt. You close your eyes. Let the chant roll over you. You picture the notes as stepping stones across a shallow stream. If you keep singing, you'll stay dry. If you stop, the water might rise. You don't test it. Somewhere near the back, someone sneezes. It is a small, dignified sound, a convent sneeze, immediately followed by a flurry of signings of the cross as if sin had briefly escaped via nasal passage. You bite the inside of your cheek to suppress a smile. The prayer moves forward.
When it ends, there is a pause. Not dramatic, not even intentional, just long enough for every pair of lungs to remember they belong to a body. Then the rustling of robes, the soft padding of sandals, the scraping of wood against stone as sisters begin to rise. You follow them out. The cloister feels cooler now. Evening is falling in earnest. The sky is blushing pale purple, and a breeze carries the scent of earth and beeswax. You inhale deeply, then sneeze once, because the universe, apparently, has a sense of timing. You wrap your arms around yourself as you walk, fingers rubbing the wool of your habit in small circles. Itchy, but familiar. Every fiber has its own story, spun by hand, dyed with prayer, sewn under the flickering judgment of an oil lamp. You pass the novice garden, where nothing has grown for weeks except Sister Leonie's frustration. She buried a small statue of Saint Fiacre upside down in protest last week. No one has yet decided if this counts as heresy or ingenuity. You reach your cell and enter. The room is small, modest, perfectly square,
with a cot, a stool, and a shelf for your psalter and comb. A single candle flickers, the flame making shadows that perform their own private play on the wall. The floor is swept. The bed is made. Your shoes are where you left them for once. You sit on the stool. Exhale. Let your hands fall into your lap, where they rest like sleepy birds. This is the quiet part of the day. The part with no assigned reading, no assigned posture, no assigned anything, except the slow process of being. You think of it as the in-between hour, after the prayers, before the final bell. You take the sprig of rosemary from your sleeve and hold it up. It smells stronger now, more awake. You twirl it in your fingers like a talisman, a reminder of the garden, of something green in a world painted in gray and wood. You press it into the pages of your psalter and close the book. A secret, preserved. You lie back on the cot. The mattress is thin, the pillow thinner. But you are tired in the best kind of way. The kind that comes from sun and soil and syllables chanted in unison. The kind that asks nothing more than stillness in return. Your eyes flutter shut. For a moment you think of the world outside the walls, of marketplaces and storms, and people who have never heard a single psalm. Then you let it go. The convent holds you like an old story, told over and over. The same, but never quite.
You awaken before the bell. There's a kind of hush in the early convent hours that feels different from silence. It's not empty. It's expectant. Like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the first flicker of movement to ripple through stone and air. You lie still for a moment, listening. The straw mattress beneath you crackles with your breath. Outside, an owl makes one last comment before surrendering the sky to the doves. Your candle has gone out in the night, but you can see the faintest silver teasing through the high window slit. Dawn is balancing on the edge of the horizon, not quite ready to fall in. You swing your feet onto the cold floor. The chill bites, as always. It's a kind of greeting now. The stones remember your steps from yesterday and prepare to remind you of them today. You stretch your arms slowly, back arching, muscles complaining like grumpy acolytes, and then reach for your veil, folded neatly on the stool. Your morning ablutions are swift. The water in the basin is cold enough to make your teeth regret existing. You splash it on your face anyway, resisting the urge to yelp. You press a dry cloth to your cheeks and stare at your reflection in the polished metal plate above the basin. You look tired, but in a soft way, like a candle that's burned steadily through the night, not one that's been blown about by wind. You finish dressing and head toward the chapel, your steps echoing faintly in the hallway. The others are beginning to stir too. You hear the shuffling of feet, the soft swish of linen, the faint clearing of throats as voices prepare to chant. No one speaks. Words before matins feel like sacrilege. The chapel door creaks open. You step into the dim interior, where shadows gather in pews like old women waiting for market day. The only light comes from a single candle near the altar, Sister Marguerite's doing. She always arrives first, always lights it the same way, always whispers something to the flame like it's her co-conspirator. You kneel, and you wait. Matins begins slowly, not with a flourish, but like water dripping from a high spout. The voices come, thin and fragile at first, then stronger, like roots digging into soil. You add yours to the weave, your tone still scratchy with sleep. Domine labia mea aperies. "O Lord, open my lips." And he does, because you sing, because you always do. The chants feel heavier in the morning, not burdened, more like weighted blankets, pressing gently on your soul. The psalms at this hour are darker too, full of lament and longing and odd metaphors involving deer, lions, and the occasional smiting. But you've come to find comfort in their sharpness. They make the day feel lighter by comparison. Halfway through the hour, your voice begins to steady. Your back straightens. Your eyes adjust to the darkness. You begin to see the outlines of the others around you. Sister Odile, mouthing words with the fierce determination of someone trying to subdue a sneeze. Sister Isabeau, whose voice always dips slightly lower than the rest, like a cello too shy to speak up. And then there's the novice, Leonie. She's directly across from you, half swallowed in her robes, her hair always slightly crooked under her veil, like she wrestled it on while sprinting. Her lips move nervously, her hands fidget in her sleeves, her eyes dart like a child caught in a game she doesn't yet understand.
You remember being her. Once. Once, your knees had bruises. Your fingers fumbled with pages. Your voice cracked on every alleluia. Now you only crack occasionally. Historians still argue whether novices in medieval convents were subjected to unnecessary severity, or if the discipline simply mirrored the outer world, cloaked in religion. Some claim that girls were emotionally crushed by early convent routines. Others argue that the convent gave them structure they couldn't have elsewhere, a strange sacred shelter from chaotic lives. You don't know what the statistics say, but you know that Leonie survives each matins, and that's something. When the last psalm fades into silence, the final prayer said, the sisters rise with a rustle that sounds like pages turning. You follow them back through the corridor, toward the refectory, where warm broth or watery porridge, depending on the day, awaits. Today is porridge. Of course. You sit in your usual place by the window, the glass beginning to sweat with the first flush of morning. You lift your spoon, sip carefully. The porridge is bland, comforting, a bowl of edible monotony, which is exactly what you need at this hour. You eat in rhythm with the sisters around you, the scrape of spoons a kind of homily. No one speaks. You're still within the golden hush of morning, where silence is not just polite, it's sacred. When breakfast is done, you carry your bowl to the basin, rinse it quickly, and head to the workroom. Today is laundry. You know because the basket of soiled habits in the courtyard has taken on a posture of gentle menace, like a dog waiting to be walked. You roll up your sleeves. The convent's wash basin is carved from stone, fed by a spout of spring water that trickles in at a speed best described as leisurely. You begin with the underrobes. The outer habits come later. The order is sacred. Sister Angel once rearranged it and was summarily exiled from laundry duty for 3 months. You plunge the first garment into the water. Soap follows, homemade, with herbs that smell faintly of judgment. Your fingers scrub rhythmically, knuckles brushing stone, fabric twisting like old arguments. The water clouds with effort. The robes are heavier than they look, as if they carry the weight of the prayers they've absorbed. You pause occasionally to shake out your hands, to flex your wrists, to look up at the sun rising higher over the convent walls. Sister Jeanne arrives after a while, her own bundle of cloth slung like a baby against her hip. She nods to you, begins her work without a word. You scrub in parallel, 2 rhythms aligned, 2 hearts beating slowly through the wash. Time passes. The habits are clean, rinsed, wrung, hung on the lines that stretch between fig trees and the old brick wall. The wind catches them gently, making them dance like somber flags from a forgotten country. You watch them sway for a moment, and you breathe.
You've always liked Laundry Day. There's something honest about it. No metaphor, no penance disguised as purpose. Just sweat and soap and sun. Just things that were dirty, made clean again. You collect your bucket, head back inside, and feel for just a second like you've done something that matters.
You pass beneath the arched corridor, your bucket still warm from the midday sun, and the scent of soap clinging faintly to your sleeves. The wind hushes through the cloister garden, rustling fig leaves and nudging the edges of the drying habits. You pause for a moment, turning your head to listen, not for anything in particular, just to let the quiet settle over you like linen. This hour between duties has always been yours. No bells ring, no chores await. The convent breathes in this moment, and you breathe with it. You wander toward the herb garden. The path crunches beneath your feet, worn smooth by centuries of sandals, frost, and prayer. Bees drift lazily between blossoms, ignoring you entirely. They're busier than you are, and possibly more devout, at least in their purpose. You reach the low stone wall that borders the garden and step inside. Rows of sage, thyme, chamomile, and lavender bloom in obedient clusters. The rosemary is trying to rebel again, reaching for the basil space. You make a mental note to prune it before Sister Marguerite notices and stages a lecture about herb humility. You crouch beside the calendula and pluck a few petals, golden and soft, like butter made of sun. They'll dry on the sill and find their way into someone's poultice by weekend. You move slowly, fingers brushing earth, taking care not to disturb the snails nestled beneath the leaves. Gardening is not officially on your rota today, but that's never mattered. The garden is an extension of your spirit, quiet, slow-growing, stubborn in its bloom. It doesn't ask for much, just light and time and hands that know when not to interfere. Historians still argue whether convent gardens were strictly utilitarian or held deeper symbolic meaning. Were they medicine cabinets or meditations in green? Likely both. Medieval herbal manuals written by nuns suggest a knowledge as spiritual as it was botanical. Some even claim the layout of certain gardens followed theological patterns, cross-shaped paths, trinity groupings, Marian colors in bloom. You don't follow those patterns consciously, but you've caught yourself planting in threes more than once. You rise and stretch your back, brushing soil from your knees. The warmth of the sun has finally reached its height. It folds over your shoulders like a shawl. You take the long path back toward the cloister, cutting through the old rose trellis. The flowers are mostly spent now, petals littering the ground like faded love letters, but the scent lingers in the stems. As you pass, you pluck a single thornless rosehip and tuck it behind your ear. A foolish gesture, perhaps, but in the convent, foolishness has few places to bloom, and the occasional indulgence carries the weight of a miracle. You reach the scriptorium just as the bell rings. Time for copying. The scriptorium is one of the older rooms in the convent, the kind where even the dust feels historic. Narrow desks line the walls, each with a slanted board, an inkwell, and a set of parchment sheets waiting for your careful hand. The high windows throw bars of light across the room, illuminating motes of dust that float like suspended prayers. You take your seat, uncap the inkwell, and range the quills straight like soldiers, all pointing in the same silent direction.
Select your favorite quill. Every sister has one, and woe to the novice who borrows without asking, and place the blank sheet in front of you. Today's task, a homily from Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Dense, flowery, theological gymnastics tied up in ivy and metaphors. You dip your pen and begin. The letters unfold beneath your fingers like choreography. You've done this so often that your wrist knows when to flick, your elbow when to pause. It's not just writing, it's embroidery in ink. Every capital letter is a flourish, every margin a canvas. You don't decorate the text, not today at least, but there's rhythm in your spacing,
in your punctuation, in the way the words hold hands across the page. Sister Elizabeth coughs behind you. 3 short barks. That means she smudged a line again. You don't turn, but you smile. The pages begin to stack slowly, each a window into someone else's thoughts, someone long gone but now echoing through your fingertips. The saints were talkative. Their words fill volumes, shelves, centuries. Your job is not to question them, just to record. But sometimes you wonder if they'd mind a footnote or two, maybe a suggestion about clarity. Use fewer metaphors, Bernard, you think, as you finish another ornate sentence about divine thirst and spiritual milk. Still, there is comfort in their voices, and a strange intimacy in tracing their words by hand. Historians still debate the literacy rates of nuns in the Middle Ages. Were they widely trained scribes, or only a rare few? Some point to abbesses like Hildegard of Bingen as proof of erudition. Others argue that many sisters were functionally illiterate, trained only to recite phonetically. Perhaps it varied, by region, by order, by fortune. Here, though, you write, and that's enough. You stop briefly to stretch your fingers, flexing the ache out of your knuckles. Your eyes flick toward the window. Outside, a bird lands on the sill. It regards you with the blank curiosity only birds possess. You nod at it, as if in agreement, and return to your task. Hours slip past like pages. Eventually, your pen slows. The ink fades to a sigh. You cap the bottle, blow gently on the last page, and lay it on the drying rack beside the window. The sunlight will do the rest. You rub the ink from your fingers with a cloth that has been blue once, long ago. Now it's the color of penitence and smudges. You don't mind. The ink never truly comes off. It lives in the creases of your hands, and the ridges of your fingerprints, and the lifeline of your palm. A permanent reminder that you are, in some quiet way, a conduit. You step outside. The air has cooled slightly. You breathe in. The bell for none will ring soon. A few minutes left to linger. You walk the cloister once, slow and aimless. The sun is slanting now, casting long shadows across the stone. You pause to admire the patterns. They shift as you move, like your own silent procession. You stop at the old fountain. The water trickles lazily over moss-covered stone. You trail your fingers through it and feel the chill ripple up your arm. The surface trembles, reforms, stills. You close your eyes. Think about nothing, or maybe everything, just long enough for the silence to feel holy. Then you stand and walk toward the chapel once more, because the hours keep turning, and your part in them is not yet done.
You're already on your feet when the bell for none rings. Just a single round note, carried gently through the corridors like a mother calling her children home. You turn instinctively toward the chapel, robes swaying slightly with your steps. There's no need to rush. The rhythm of the day moves like a well-wound clock, and you are part of that movement, one of many quiet gears turning steadily through prayer and time. As you enter the chapel, the light has shifted again. It now pools along the floor in long gold ribbons like spilled honey, illuminating the dust in the air and giving everything a soft, sleepy glow. You take your place on the wooden bench, one that knows your weight better than it knows the seasons, and settle in as the others gather. Sister Odile is first to arrive, her steps always loud and purposeful, as if she believes God hears her better when her feet make declarations. Sister Leonie slips in behind her, more a suggestion of a presence than a person, and then the rest follow. It's a silent dance, rehearsed so many times it no longer feels like choreography. The prayer begins.
Deus in adiutorium meum intende. O God, come to my assistance. The chant drapes itself over the room, soft and slow like wool against bare skin. You join in, your voice weaving into the others. The words aren't new. They're old companions, steady, predictable, strangely comforting in their repetition. They carry centuries within them. When you say these words, you were saying them with the dead, with nuns who knelt here long before you, with others you'll never know, in convents you'll never see, living lives as quiet as your own. It's a strange kind of unity, invisible but strong. The psalms for none are shorter, simpler, midday's gentle lullaby. You let them pass through you, not clinging to the meanings, but to the music, to the shape of syllables, and the way they soften the world around you. By now, the prayers feel less like recitations and more like breathing. You blink slowly, and in the flickering candlelight, you notice something odd. Sister Elizabeth has a feather in her sleeve, just the tip of it peeking out, gray and soft and utterly out of place. You wonder how it got there. Perhaps a bird landed on her laundry. Perhaps it's a quill she forgot to return. Or perhaps, and this is your favorite theory, it's a secret symbol of rebellion, her personal protest against the monotony of beige. You catch her eye briefly and raise an eyebrow. She doesn't flinch, but the corner of her mouth quirks upward ever so slightly. It's the closest thing to a wink you're likely to see in a house of God. The prayers continue uninterrupted.
Historians still argue whether mid-afternoon prayers held genuine spiritual weight or if they were simply a placeholder, a way to mark the hours and fill the silence. Some monastic texts describe none as the least beloved of the canonical hours, often recited quickly, almost sleepily. Others portray it as the heart of the day's spiritual rhythm, a small flame held steady against the creeping shadow of fatigue. You're not sure what you believe, but you do know this: without it, the day would feel unfinished, hollow, like skipping a chapter in a book you've read 1,000 times. When the final prayer is said and the sisters begin to rise, you linger a moment longer, letting your knees rest in the cradle of wood, your eyes trailing upward to the small stained glass window above the altar. It glows like fire now, casting soft reds and oranges into the room. The image is too faded to be clear, perhaps a saint, perhaps an angel, perhaps just an old design that no one has remembered to interpret. You like it that way, mysterious, quiet, ambiguous. You stand and step back into the corridor. The rest of the day lies before you like a calm pond, smooth, undisturbed. The tasks are fewer now. The pace has slowed. You walk slowly toward the workroom, where a basket of mending awaits you, its contents bulging like it might start a conversation if left too long. You sit by the window. The basket creaks as you shift through it. Torn hems, worn sleeves, buttons hanging on like they've lost the will to live. You select a robe with a frayed collar and thread your needle carefully, fingers moving with practiced grace. You mend in silence. Occasionally, you hum, nothing specific, just a low, wordless tune passed down from the laundry lines or the scriptorium or perhaps the hens themselves. You don't question its origin. It keeps your hands steady, your mind calm. Across from you, Sister Marguerite mends socks. She does it with the focus of a surgeon. Her tongue sticks out slightly as she works, and she mutters corrections to the fabric as if the holes have personally offended her. You admire her commitment, even if her technique is more violent than yours. You exchange no words, but the silence is warm. The sun crawls lazily across the floor.
Eventually, your shoulders begin to ache, and you set down the needle. The robe is repaired, the hem neat. The day moves on. You return the basket to its corner and stretch slowly, rolling your neck and shoulders. A single beam of light hits your hand just right, catching the silver thread you used. It sparkles, just once, before fading. A small reward, a quiet miracle.
You decide to walk the garden again. Outside, the wind has picked up. Not sharply, just enough to rustle leaves and tug lightly at your veil. You step onto the gravel path, your sandals crunching rhythmically. The fig tree at the corner of the wall is shedding its leaves early this year. You watch one tumble down in a slow, lazy spiral before landing on the ground with a soft, papery sigh. You remember a story one of the elder nuns used to tell, a tale about a fig tree that bloomed in December and was deemed a miracle. You've never seen that happen here. But then again, maybe miracles aren't always in the blooms. Sometimes they're in the quiet decay, in the way the wind knows how to say goodbye. You reach the far end of the garden, where the stone bench waits in the shadow of the south wall. You sit. The stone is cold beneath you. The air smells of sage and earth, and something distant, perhaps the bakery in the village, or maybe just your memory trying to fill the silence with warmth. You close your eyes, for just a moment, not to sleep, not to pray, just to be. Historians rarely write about the quiet minutes, the ones between events, the empty spaces, the pauses, but perhaps they should, because in a life like this, it is the quiet that shapes you, the silence that teaches, the stillness that holds you together when the world feels too large, too loud. You open your eyes again. The sky has begun to soften. A pigeon lands awkwardly on the garden wall, flapping with the grace of a crumpled tunic. It coos indignantly, then settles into a watchful perch, eyeing you like it expects a confession. You offer none. Instead, you stand and begin the slow walk back to your cell, the rhythm of the day still humming gently beneath your skin.
You can tell it's a feast day, not because of trumpets or triumph, but because the soup smells vaguely different. A little more salt, maybe? Or perhaps a chopped leek tossed in for flair. Either way, the scent drifting from the convent kitchen holds a faint whisper of celebration. Subtle enough to be pious, but bold enough to make your stomach perk up and take notice. You shuffle into the refectory with the other sisters, robes swishing gently, the rustle of linen joining the soft creak of old benches and the clatter of wooden spoons. The room, normally as lively as a stone slab, now carries the low hum of anticipation. A feast day is not exactly a party, but it is, well, not a party. It's a liturgical loophole, a sacred excuse for a little more bread and a little less silence. The long tables are set exactly as they always are. Simple bowls, humble cups, loaves broken and placed with the precision of a nun who could have been a military commander in another life. You take your place. Same spot as always. Your neighbor is Sister Angeline, who always smells faintly of lavender and onions, and who will, without fail, accidentally spill a crumb down her sleeve and not notice until Compline. The bell chimes. Everyone bows their heads. The reader for the day begins her passage, something from the life of St. Clare, though her voice is so reedy and soft that you catch only every third word. It doesn't matter. The rhythm is familiar. The cadence washes over you like warm water. Your eyes drift to the bowl in front of you. It's not turnip. It's parsnip. You blink, momentarily overwhelmed by the culinary excitement. You raise your spoon reverently and take a bite. It's still mostly water, but the texture is surprisingly varied. And someone, somewhere, added pepper. You pause, spoon in hand, and let that sink in. Pepper.
Historians still argue whether spices like pepper were common in medieval convents or reserved only for the wealthy or dying. Some argue that nuns, despite their vows of poverty, were surprisingly well fed, especially in Benedictine houses. Others claim their diets were one tragic root vegetable away from martyrdom. Likely it varied from order to order, from season to season, from bishop's favor to bishop's forgetfulness. But today, you have pepper, and it's glorious. You eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it were roast goose with glazed fruit. The bread, too, is softer than usual. Not fresh exactly, but maybe only 1 day stale instead of 3. A luxury by cloistered standards. Across from you, Sister Claudine closes her eyes as she chews, the expression on her face one of such profound bliss that you wonder if she's seen angels or just imagining butter. A few seats down, someone coughs, then someone else giggles, quickly muffled by a napkin and a glare from the prioress. It's a subtle rebellion, but it counts. Feast days loosen the seams of daily life, just a little. After the meal, you help with the cleanup, rinsing bowls in the basin behind the kitchen, your sleeves rolled up and your hands pruny. The water is warm, and the smell of herbs lingers on the pots. Someone left a scrap of root in the sink, and it floats there like a shipwrecked monk, slowly spinning. You hum softly while you scrub. Something festive. Not quite a hymn, not quite not a hymn either. The afternoon stretches before you like a length of woven linen, plain, purposeful, steady. Most of the usual chores are suspended. No scriptorium duty, no garden weeding. Even the laundry has been mercifully postponed, as if the Virgin herself whispered, "Let them rest, just for today." So you rest. You find a corner in the cloister where the sun hits just right, warm but not too warm, bright but not blinding. You sit with your back against the stone, legs tucked beneath you, and simply exist. It's a strange thing, rest. Not sleep, not idleness, just a moment with no immediate purpose. Your fingers play absent-mindedly with the edge of your sleeve. A beetle crawls across your boot, unimpressed by your presence. The leaves above shift slightly, letting in dappled light like stained glass made of sky. You breathe in and out, and let your thoughts wander. You think about the saint whose feast is being celebrated today, Saint Odelia, blind from birth, or so the story goes, and healed only after baptism, a symbol of clarity through faith, of sight through submission. You've heard the tale a dozen times, maybe more, and yet today it feels different. You imagine her standing where you are now, hands outstretched, sunlight on her face. Did she ever feel like this? Just at peace? Did she ever sigh and think, "Yes, today I will eat parsnip soup with pepper and not weep about it"? You hope she did. You stand eventually, knees creaking like old doors, and wander slowly back through the cloister. The day is aging gently. The light has begun to mellow. Shadows stretch lazily across the walkway. A breeze lifts the hem of your robe, tickles your ankle, then vanishes like a mischievous ghost. You pass the chapel and hear faint singing. Sister Agnetha and her novice practicing harmonies for Vespers. Their voices rise and fall like doves circling a bell tower. You pause to listen, unseen. Their notes are soft, imperfect, but full of intention, full of love. It's one of those moments you'll remember, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was quietly perfect. Eventually, you return to your cell. You open the small window just enough to let in air, but not drafts. You light a stub of candle. You sit on your narrow bed, and take out your copy of the Rule of Saint Benedict, the backbone of your life, the guidebook to humility, obedience, and timely bell ringing. You read a line aloud, your voice a murmur in the stillness. Let all guests who arrive be received as Christ. You smile. No guests have arrived today, unless you count the beetle. Historians often debate how strictly the rule was followed in every convent. Some say it was adapted freely, reinterpreted to suit local customs. Others insist on rigid enforcement, down to the very hour of waking. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between, like most things. You flip to your favorite passage, the one about moderation in all things. You read it again, slowly, and for a fleeting moment you feel something warm and vast and inexplicable open within you. It's not joy exactly, more like recognition, like the rule was written not for nuns in general, but for you. You close the book and set it aside. The candle flickers, the shadows deepen, and the feast day continues its quiet descent into evening. No fanfare, no fireworks, just parsnip soup, soft bread, and an extra hymn at prayer time. But somehow that feels like enough, more than enough.
The bell for sext has long since faded into silence. It's that peculiar stretch of late afternoon when time begins to loosen its grip, when the light takes on a golden thickness and the shadows start to soften their edges. You know exactly what comes next. It's as familiar to you as the worn path between the dormitory and the chapel. Laundry. You sigh, not dramatically, not rebelliously, but with the gentle resignation of someone who has already accepted the eternal rhythm of wet linens and wooden tubs. You gather your bundle of dirty habits, underrobes, and pillow covers and head to the washing area. It's tucked behind the herb garden, next to the old wall that still smells faintly of vinegar and holy water, depending on the weather. The laundry basin is already half filled, the water reflecting the clouds like a puddle of melted pewter. Someone's added soapwort and a bit of ash, the sacred mix that will neither truly clean nor truly ruin the cloth, but will certainly leave your hands cracked and your sleeves slightly stiffer than before. You roll up your sleeves, kneel by the tub, and begin. The rhythm of laundry is slow, methodical, oddly soothing. You scrub, rinse, twist. Scrub, rinse, twist. The cloth slaps against the stone with a wet sound that could be mistaken for applause if you were feeling poetic. But you're not. You're feeling damp and mildly betrayed by the socks. One of the older pairs has disintegrated mid-wash. The heel now resembles a window frame. You sigh again and toss it onto the ever-growing pile of fabric that has passed beyond redemption. Someone will eventually stitch them back to life with mismatched thread and determination. Probably you. As you scrub, your thoughts drift, not because you're avoiding the task, but because it's the kind of work that invites wandering minds. You start thinking about sin, not the dramatic kind, not the kind that gets carved into confessionals or shouted from pulpits, but the small ones, the ordinary ones. The sigh you gave during matins, the slightly sarcastic eye roll at Sister Justine's overly loud snoring, the extra piece of bread you took during yesterday's meal because it was crusty in just the right way, the impulse to scream when your woolen undertunic refuses to stay untangled. Tiny trespasses, harmless maybe, but not meaningless. You rinse the linen with a little more care now, as if repentance could be soaked into the cloth and wrung out with the gray water. The nun who taught you laundry years ago, Sister Beatrix, may she rest in peace, always said that washing was a kind of prayer.
You scrub your soul clean along with the garments, she used to say, smiling like she just invented theology. Historians still argue whether medieval nuns actually saw housework as a spiritual discipline or if it was simply the necessity of cloistered living. Some records hint at mystical interpretations, laundry as penitence, sweeping as humility, kneading bread as an echo of Christ's own body. Other documents are more blunt. Chores had to be done, so nuns did them. You like to believe both are true. You lean back and stretch your fingers. They're already beginning to prune, and your nails are lined with soap and thread. You wipe your brow with the back of your wrist, then glance up at the sky.
A few birds pass overhead, their flight loose and unhurried. Doves, maybe, or something less symbolic. You wonder if they have somewhere to be, or if they're just out for a stroll. Behind you, Sister Amelie hums softly as she stirs the next basin. She always hums the same tune, a lullaby none of you recognize, and she swears she doesn't remember learning. It's slow, wistful, almost sad. It wraps around your thoughts like steam. You go back to scrubbing. This time, a particularly stubborn patch of something, possibly ink, possibly stew, possibly divine punishment, stares up at you from the hem of a wimple. You attack it with a mixture of patience and vengeance. The stain refuses to confess. You wonder if it's symbolic. You smile, just slightly. There's something absurd about how much effort it takes to keep a life of simplicity, well, simple. The habits must be clean, the veils must be straight, the floors must be swept, the prayers must be recited. None of it is glamorous, none of it is revolutionary, and yet it all feels necessary. There's no glory in scrubbing socks, but there's honesty, and that feels holy. Eventually, your basket is empty, your sleeves are soaked, and the water is a murky, grayish soup of lather, dust, and possibly fragments of old sin. You haul the wet laundry to the line out back and begin to hang it piece by piece, pinching each corner with wooden clips that never quite grip the way they should. The garments flap gently in the breeze. It's a sight that always makes you pause. Rows and rows of identical robes shifting in the wind like quiet ghosts. There's something oddly beautiful about it, this visual chorus of uniformity. No names, no distinctions, just cloth and wind and light. A washing away of ego, a celebration of sameness. You stand still for a moment, letting the breeze dry your face. Then, with your basket on your hip, you head back toward the cloister. You're halfway there when you see Sister Therese crouched by the garden wall, frowning at a patch of moss like it has personally insulted her theology. You greet her with a nod, and she waves you over. "I think the moss is growing in the shape of St. Peter's Key," she whispers, pointing. You look. It's not. But you nod solemnly. Clearly a sign. She grins, satisfied. You leave her to her revelations and continue on, your sandals squelching slightly from your damp feet. Back in your cell, you peel off your outer robe and hang it carefully by the window. It smells of rosemary, soap, and something earthy like hard work and forgiveness. You sit down and stretch again, letting your spine realign with a series of slow pops. The sun is lower now. The light is warmer. Your hands are raw, but your heart feels quiet. Not empty, not full, just quiet. You pour a bit of salve onto your palms, a mixture of goose fat and lavender, prepared by Sister Madeline in the apothecary with the solemnity of a pharmacist and the flair of a witch. It smells comforting. It stings slightly. You rub it in and close your eyes. There's no bell for laundry, no liturgy for socks, but you feel the same sense of order, of rhythm, of belonging. And somehow, in this silent space between chores and chants, you sense the whisper of something sacred. It's not loud, it's not grand, but it's there.
a holiness made of suds and sunlight. And for now, that is enough. You're woken, not by a bell, but by a hush. A different kind of silence, heavy and strange. It presses against your chest as you sit up in your narrow bed, the wool blanket still clinging to your knees. Outside your cell window, the usual birdsong is absent, replaced by the low rustle of footsteps, soft, slow, uncertain. Something has changed. You slide your feet into worn slippers and pull your robe around you, the fabric stiff from yesterday's drying. The air is cool, not yet touched by dawn. You open the door and step into the corridor. A few other sisters are already there, moving like sleepwalkers, eyes lowered, hands folded. No one speaks. You don't need words. You already know. Someone has died. It's not an unfamiliar experience in the convent. Time has its way of folding in on itself here, and with each fold, someone vanishes. The oldest among you, Sister Leontine, had been quietly fading for months. Her steps had grown smaller, her voice fainter, her eyes more clouded. You knew this was coming. Still, it feels like a candle has gone out in the center of a vast cathedral, leaving the corners darker than you expected. The sisters file into the chapel, heads bowed. The altar is unadorned, save for a single taper, flickering weakly in the breeze that slips under the wooden doors. Sister Leontine lies in the center aisle, wrapped already in her death shroud. Her face is uncovered, peaceful. Hands folded over her chest, a sprig of rosemary between her fingers. You feel a strange sense of awe, an almost reverent stillness. It's like witnessing someone asleep in eternity. The community surrounds her silently, forming a ring of quiet prayer. Some kneel, others remain standing, swaying faintly as if caught between worlds. You take your place among them. Your knees press into the cold stone floor. You close your eyes and breathe. A little deeper, a little slower. Historians still argue whether death in the convent was feared or welcomed. Some letters and records suggest nuns saw it as liberation, finally unshackled from the burdens of flesh and duty. Others depict dread, a desperate clinging to life within these walls. Maybe it was both, or perhaps it simply depended on the day. Sister Leontine had not seemed afraid. She had joked about it even, only days ago. "When I go, don't bury me in that itchy wool," she said with a crooked smile, her voice like wind across parchment. "Give me linen, soft, like clouds. Let me go to the Lord without scratching." You smiled then. Now you wonder if anyone remembered. You glance at the shroud. Linen, pale, neatly sewn. Sister Madeleine's stitches probably. Precise, tender, evenly spaced. You feel a flicker of relief. The service begins without much formality. Just a reading from the Psalms, a soft chant that rises and falls like breath. You don't understand every word, some Latin, some Old French, but the meaning washes over you anyway. Peace, memory, release. After the prayers, it's time to prepare her body. You volunteered. You always do. Not because you're brave, but because there's something about tending to the dead that makes the living feel real. You and 2 others carry the body to the washing room. The air is warmer here, the hearth lit gently, casting golden shadows on the walls. You roll up your sleeves. You fetch the linen cloths, the bowl of warm water, the oils. The rosemary sprig now floats in the basin, scenting everything with soft green earthiness. You begin, carefully, lovingly.
As if she might feel it. Her hair is thin, white, still bearing traces of rosemary from the garden. You remember brushing it for her once when she couldn't lift her arms. She'd told you stories of her youth, how she'd once danced in secret before taking the veil. "I was terrible," she whispered, "but I smiled the whole time. That counts for something." You smile now. You bathe her arms, her face, her feet. You anoint her with oil, juniper, lavender, a hint of myrrh. Each touch a blessing, each motion a prayer. No one rushes, no one interrupts. Outside, the day begins. The sun eases over the convent wall. A bird sings again. Maybe the same one as yesterday, maybe not. The burial will be simple. No grand procession, just a procession of worn boots and worn hearts. You carry her to the small cemetery behind the chapel, past rows of crooked stones and names half swallowed by moss. Each grave tells a quiet story, each plot a page of the same old book. You lower her into the earth. The soil smells of last night's rain and long-forgotten leaves. One by one, the sisters drop handfuls of dirt onto the shroud. You do the same. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. But it is deeply, achingly human. Afterward, you remain a moment longer. You crouch beside her grave and press your fingers into the soft soil, grounding yourself. The dirt is damp, cool, real. You whisper a simple goodbye, no poetic flourish, just gratitude. Then you rise, wipe your hands, and return to the cloister. The day does not pause for grief. It never does. You help prepare the noon meal, barley porridge today. You stir slowly, methodically, the rhythm of the wooden spoon familiar, anchoring. A few sisters exchange glances, eyes still wet, but no one speaks of it aloud. In the convent, mourning is not a spectacle. It's a practice. Later, you sit with Sister Madeline. You mend socks while she rewinds old prayer beads onto a broken string. She was the last of the first, Madeline says suddenly. You look up. She entered the year before I did, when the chapel was still stone and sky, when we only had 5 beds and 1 cracked chamber pot. She taught me how to knead bread with one hand and pray with the other. You nod, unsure what to say. Now it's us. We're the memory, she adds softly. You return to your stitching, the needle slipping through wool with a quiet sigh. You know she's right. That night, as you lie in bed, you hear the wind against the shutters, not angry, not weeping, just moving, like always. And you think about Sister Leontine's voice, old and dry, like autumn leaves, telling stories that made no sense, but always made you feel something. You imagine her now, dancing, poorly, somewhere in the realm beyond linen and dirt, and for the first time that day, you laugh. Just a little, just enough.
You're in the cloister walk when the knock echoes, gentle but sharp enough to catch everyone's attention. You freeze mid-step, your foot hovering just above the moss-slick stone. It's not the hour for visitors. In fact, there aren't really any hours for visitors. The convent gate almost never opens unless something truly unusual occurs, like a bishop's visit or the rare and dire delivery of extra flour. A second knock comes, 3 measured taps, then silence. You glance at Sister Therese, who looks equally puzzled and perhaps a little too hopeful, as if she's just remembered that sometimes letters arrive. Rarely, but still. You both drift toward the entrance gate, drawn by that gentle twinge of curiosity cloaked in religious duty. Behind the iron-barred wooden gate stands a girl, maybe 15, maybe younger. Her hair is a tangle, her shoes half-tied, her hands gripped into fists at her sides, not with anger, but as if bracing herself against the world. She's not crying, though her eyes glisten like she might if someone so much as breathed the word welcome. Slung over her shoulder is a cloth bundle that you strongly suspect contains 1 dress, a cracked loaf of bread, and perhaps a rock she thinks is lucky. You unlock the gate with a creak that sounds far more dramatic than necessary. She doesn't flinch. "I'm here for the silence," she says quickly, as if she's practiced the phrase. You blink. It's not the usual introduction. You gesture her inside. She steps through the gate with all the ceremony of a knight entering battle, though her knees are clearly knocking beneath her skirt. The wind flutters the edge of her sleeve. Her name, as you soon learn, is Isabel. The prioress is summoned. She arrives slowly, her veil impeccable, her eyes tired but kind. She doesn't ask many questions. She never does. There's a quiet interview in the guest parlor, where Isabel fidgets with the hem of her sleeve while answering questions in monosyllables. She is an orphan, she says. Her uncle's house was loud. Too loud. The convent, she'd heard, was quiet. It's not the most compelling theological argument, but the prioress nods. There is room. There is always room. Later that day, Isabel is shown to a novice's cell, modest, narrow, with a small wooden bed and a shelf for a book she does not yet own. You are chosen to guide her, not because you're especially wise or gentle, but because you're there, and because Sister Emily once told the prioress you were good with baby chickens, and surely that skill must translate. You bring her water, a piece of dry fruit. You tell her not to touch the stove unless she wants her eyebrows to vanish. She listens without interrupting, nodding furiously, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles are the color of moonlight. You show her the latrine, the laundry room, the herb garden, the place where the sisters hide when they've accidentally broken a ceramic cup and don't want to confess until after Compline. She does not laugh. Not yet. That night she is seated beside you in the chapel for evening prayers. She does not know the Latin, but she mimics the movements with surprising precision. She bows when you bow, stands when you stand, fidgeted only once. The candlelight makes her look older, but also smaller, a contradiction you'll get used to. After prayers, you walk her back to her cell. She hesitates in the doorway. "They said it would be cold," she whispers, "but it's quieter than I thought." You nod. "That's the trick," you say. "It's not just silence. It's the kind that gets inside your bones." She doesn't reply. The next day, she follows you like a very silent duckling. You try not to overwhelm her, so you save the truly boring tasks, untying bundles of dried thyme, picking stones out of the lentils, re-rolling candle ends. She takes to them with unexpected devotion, as if each task were a secret ritual she must master. You don't tell her the truth, that none of you really know what you're doing half the time. You save that for week 3. During her second week, she finally speaks more than 3 words in a row. You're mending a torn curtain together when she asks, with complete seriousness, "Do nuns dream less?" You blink. "What?" She shrugs. It's quiet all the time. Doesn't that make your brain quieter too?" You look at the curtain as if the answer is hidden in the hem. "Sometimes I dream of soup," you say. She nods, like this is a perfectly scholarly answer. "Mine are loud," she murmurs. "Still." And you know she's not talking about soup. There's an unspoken rule in the convent. You never ask what someone left behind unless they choose to tell you. So you don't pry. But she volunteers bits over time, like someone dropping crumbs behind them in case they ever need to find their way back. She missed her mother. She didn't like the way her uncle slammed the door when he came home. Once, she sat under a table to avoid being seen for 3 days straight. You don't say anything dramatic. Just offer her extra rosemary for her pillow. She smiles finally during the feast of Saint Hildegard, your least exciting celebration, mostly because it involves an extra prayer and slightly warmer gruel. But Sister Agnetha makes a joke about Hildegard being the patron saint of tolerating bad singing, and Isabel snorts. It's the closest thing to joy she's shown yet. You feel oddly proud. The prioress tells you that Isabel will begin formal instruction soon. You'll still guide her, but now Sister Lucienne will take over teaching her Latin, scripture, and how to hold a quill without poking her own eye. You nod. Change comes slowly here, but it always comes. One morning, you find her in the herb garden alone, talking quietly to the rosemary. She jumps when you approach, but doesn't apologize. They don't answer, she says. Plants rarely do, you reply. She pauses. But they listen. You nod again. Yes. Yes, they do.
You rise before the bell. It's not intentional. Just one of those days when your body wakes up before your mind agrees. The convent is still draped in that pre-dawn blue, the kind of quiet color that seems invented solely for places like this. You wrap your shawl around your shoulders and step into the corridor, your slippers making barely a whisper on the flagstones. Outside, the garden is just beginning to stir. Dew clings to every leaf like a prayer still waiting to be spoken. The rosemary is fragrant in the damp air, and the stone bench beneath the pear tree is still cool from the night. You sit there a moment, drawing your knees up, watching your breath cloud and vanish like incense at morning mass. It is not a special day, not a feast day, not a fast, just another in a long, steady string of days that make up a nun's life. But even the ordinary ones begin with reverence. You hear soft footsteps behind you. Isabel, still barefoot, still shy, still half asleep. She sits beside you without a word, her eyes locked on the horizon. You both watch the sun rise, not grandly, but slowly, modestly, as if trying not to wake anyone. After a long silence, she says, "Do you think we'll still be here in 30 years?" You smile, without looking at her. "If I am, I hope someone brings me softer shoes." She laughs softly, but the question remains in the air like mist. You don't know. Historians still argue whether women who took the veil truly intended to stay for life or merely sought a refuge from a world that gave them few choices. Some left, returning to families or forced into marriages. Others endured decades behind walls that changed more slowly than the seasons. But you've never planned beyond tomorrow. You guide Isabel back inside for prime, the first prayer of the day. The chapel smells of wax and stone, the benches familiar under your hands. The words rise again. Latin syllables half chanted, half remembered. Isabel knows more of them now. She stumbles, but she sings.
After the service, the day rolls forward like a cart on an uneven road. You help sweep the dining hall. You teach Isabel how to trim candle wicks without ruining her thumb. You eat lentil soup and dry bread, then gather onions from the root cellar while trying not to think about how many of them you'll be peeling tomorrow. Sister Amelie tries to sneak a second apple from the storage bin and pretends it's for the Blessed Virgin. You roll your eyes. She winks. Later, during reading hour, you sit on the bench near the cloister fountain. A copy of St. Augustine's Confessions rests on your lap, the pages smudged with fingerprints older than your grandmother's grandmother. You're not really reading, you're listening. To the water, to the wind in the ivy, to the deep, slow rhythm of a life lived without ambition, but full of purpose. You remember your first year here, the way your hands trembled during prayer, how your voice cracked when it was your turn to read aloud, how you wondered if the silence would ever stop sounding like a scream. Now the silence is where you go to rest. You look across the cloister and see Isabel talking to Sister Agnetha, both kneeling in the dirt. Isabel is holding a tiny sprig of mint like it might bite her. Agnetha is explaining something with grand gestures, probably how not to kill it. You can't hear them, but Isabel's face is lit up in a way that makes something shift inside your chest. It's the quiet kind of pride, like planting something and trusting it to grow. You close your book and rise. That evening, at Compline, the candles flicker wildly with the wind. The chant wavers, but no one stumbles. Even the wax runs slowly tonight, in thick golden ribbons down the holders. You close your eyes. You think of Sister Leontine, of the girl who danced in secret, of Sister Madeline, who now walks with a limp, but still makes the best sourdough in 5 parishes, of Isabel, who once asked if plants listened, and now hums to the rosemary like a lullaby. You think of the silence, not empty, but filled with everything unsaid. A silence that holds memory, grief, stubbornness, kindness, and the occasional bout of stomach cramps from too much barley soup. You breathe it in. Let it settle. Let it become part of you. After prayers, you stay behind in the chapel for a moment, just you in the dark. The stone is cool under your fingertips as you run your hand along the pew. You trace the grain of the wood, the indent where centuries of knees have knelt. You whisper a psalm, not because anyone is listening, but because sometimes the words want to be said. Then you blow out the last candle and step into the corridor. The others are already moving toward their cells, slippers brushing against the stones like moth wings. You pass Isabel's door. It's open just a crack. Inside, she's writing something, by candlelight, on parchment. Her brow is furrowed, her lips move silently. She doesn't notice you. You smile and keep walking. Your own cell waits, modest and square, just as you left it. You lie down, pull the wool blanket over your shoulders, close your eyes, and rest.
And now, the day is over. You've walked the cloister halls, watched candles flicker, felt the hush of prayers wash over you like a warm breeze. The convent returns to stillness. No more chores, no more chants. Just the soft creak of old wood settling, the rustle of fabric as a sister turns in her sleep, and the faint, rhythmic breath of the world easing into its dreams. The stone walls hold the day gently, like a mother with a sleeping child. They don't press, they cradle. Outside, the stars bloom one by one, shy, silver lights in a sky so vast it could swallow all your worries without a sound. The rosemary sways slightly in the wind. The garden doesn't ask questions. It just grows. And you, curled beneath your woolen blanket, are part of it all. There's no bell for sleep. Only the closing of your eyes, the letting go, the breath that comes slower, softer. Maybe, in your dreams, you'll hear the echo of footsteps on ancient stone, the rustle of a novice's veil, the quiet splash of water in a cloister fountain. Maybe you'll see Sister Leontine again, dancing, badly, but joyfully, in a place where no one minds the rhythm. Maybe you'll just drift into darkness, and that will be enough. You don't need to do anything now. You don't need to fix or remember or understand. Just let go. Let the silence hold you. Let the story fade. Let the world fall away one breath at a time. Good night, gentle soul. You made it to the end.